this year. And this is the Western edition. So primarily, we'll be covering North America, Europe, and hopefully some people who are staying up late in India as well. So welcome, welcome. So Indiaspora is a nonprofit network and a platform whose mission is to be a force for good. We work with the 35 million strong global diaspora and really get them to connect with each other, to connect with people across the world, and join this movement to be a force for good. Indiaspora does a lot of things online as well. We are on all the social media platforms, so you can follow us on Facebook or LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, and so forth. We also do a host of virtual events such as this Climate Summit. We also do a healthcare series. We do a lot more programming, and all this can be accessed through our newsletter that goes to over 25,000 global diaspora. We also highly curate events that are physical in nature across the world. Indiaspora, of course, started in the United States, but over the past 14 years, we've expanded to Canada, UK, Singapore, UAE, Australia, and India as well. So you can catch us in any of these countries. We recently concluded our global forum in Bangalore, where we had 400 people from 23 countries get together. We launched a report detailing the impact of the global diaspora on India, and also laid out recommendations of how the diaspora and India can partner as India marches towards its 100th centenary in 2047. So now to the businesses at hand. Why AI? Why climate? I have an affinity for both these topics, having been from Silicon Valley and having been involved with a lot of tech companies and AI companies. You know, AI is upon us in every form or fashion, whether it's in your personal life, your professional life, your community. AI is upon us everywhere. I also, 18 years ago, started an organization called the Corporate Eco Forum, which is a membership group of almost 90 of the world's largest companies to really look at climate in many different ways, share best practices, innovations, and so forth. So today, what we're trying to do with the AI and climate is to bring the two together. As we all know, AI is probably now the biggest consumer of energy, and our opening keynote will opine on that a bit more, but it's consuming energy at a rate never seen before. And so the question upon us is, can AI have a net positive impact on climate? And in order to do this, Indiaspora has the unique nature to convene a diverse set of voices. We have academics, policymakers, technologists, startup founders, and many, many other parts of the community come together today, both on the Western Hemisphere, which is event is happening right now, but also 12 hours from now, if you're still awake, join us for the Eastern event. We've got a great set of questions that we pose to our speakers. We want really to seek good answers, good solutions. We want the audience, all of you in the chat box to ask provocative questions and thoughtful questions as well for the panelists and for the keynote speakers and others. So what we're trying to do here is to really answer the question and not just talk about it. Can AI be a positive force? Can AI be used to solve the climate crisis rather than add to the climate crisis? So we have a fabulous, fabulous lineup of speakers. We have people like Deepali Khanna, who has been a proponent with the Rockefeller Foundation. We have Varun Sivaram, who's been on the global stage in many different activities, both in government and now as a startup founder. We have Jigar Shah, who was in the prior administration working tirelessly to solve climate issues. Deepak Garg, one of our Founder Circle members, who has a very unique startup in this space. But to really, really open up this whole event is my dear friend, Professor Arun Majumdar, who is at Stanford. He runs the Stanford Doerr School of Sustainability. John Doerr, who is a major philanthropist and venture capitalist in the Bay Area, has set this up with $1 billion endowment and given the unique responsibility to one of us in the diaspora, Dr. Arun Majumdar, to head up this school and institute. So Arun has had an amazing career to date. He's not only been an academic, he's been in the private sector, he's been in government as a founder of the DARPA-E project in the Department of Energy. He's done an incredible array of things. So we decided who better to address AI, energy, climate than my dear friend Arun. Arun, welcome to make your opening remarks and keynote remarks.
Well, thank you, MR, and thank you to Amita and the whole team for inviting me and setting this up. I have a few slides I could share. As someone just said, AI is smoking hot, and, but this is the wrong kind of smoke. But what I'll try to do, Amita and MR, can you see the slides?
Yeah.
Okay. What I'll try to do is to give you a little background on what it takes to power AI. And in terms of the good that is coming out on climate, pretty much every computing model that we know of now in predicting not just climate in the future, but weather in the near term and the connections between them, there's a lot of space in between. They all use AI now because it just accelerated the computing and the hybrid models of physics-based and the AI-based is where things are going. And its ability to take complex systems and understand patterns in those complex systems is used widely today in materials discovery and systems analysis, et cetera. So I think there's a lot of good that's coming out, and it is really an inflection point in what AI can do. AI has been around for a long time, but the convergence and the confluence of compute power, data, and the cost is making this a very unique time. And it's another set of revolution in automation that is coming, but it's more than just automation, it's a thinking automation. So I think there's a lot of positive that can come out. These are early days, it's a long journey ahead. But I think what I'm going to talk about is really what's powering AI. And the reason this is important is the following, and this is a statement, and there are multiple statements that Jensen and others have made, is that we are power limited. Access to electricity and is going to be one of the key factors. And if you look at what's at stake out here, I'll just refer to this report that I was fortunate to be a part of. And this is when Secretary Jennifer Granholm was the Secretary of Energy, and I was on her advisory board, and she came to us in, I think, April of 2024, saying that we have a potential problem ahead because the AI revolution is here. It's early days, and that needs electricity. And the AI field is going at an incredible rate, whereas the electricity sector is not used to providing electricity at that rate. And if we don't provide the electricity, the AI companies may go overseas, which becomes a national security problem. So she asked her advisory board to take a look at this and make some recommendations. So I just highlight this, and if you have a picture, you could take the QR code and download it. It's still there on the DOE website, and the issues that we highlighted are still important. These have not gone away, and so I just wanted to go through some of our insights that we got in that process. Here is the projection, the demand in terms of terawatt hours And just as a reference point, the United States electricity consumption is roughly 4,000 terawatt hours, a little north of 4,000 terawatt hours per year. And as you can see, it was growing at very moderate rates. And suddenly you got this AI revolution, and the demand for electricity has gone up. And what you can see on the left-hand side is a projection of how much is needed in the future. And there's a huge uncertainty out there. And different groups have estimated that. And the uncertainty in energy demand growth is due to three factors. One is the algorithmic efficiency. Yeah, and algorithms are becoming much more energy efficient. Google had announced 2 years ago that they got 100x improvement in the energy efficiency in 2 years, which is incredible. The hardware is getting more efficient, but there's also something called the Jevons paradox, which is, if you get more and more efficient, you open up more power, and the competition in the AI world is such that that power gets used up. So that's a kind of an opposing factor. And this tension between the efficiency that you get and the use of computing power due to the competition makes it a kind of an uncertain world that we are going into. But yet, I would say that the access to electricity is going to be one of the key factors in the growth of AI. So I'll just walk you through what are the things the United States, and I'm talking from the US perspective, but some of it could be used overseas as well. What's the short term, midterm, long term? The short term is that you have algorithmic hardware efficiency subject to Jevons paradox. The second thing I'll talk about, the increasing the capacity of the existing electricity grid infrastructure, and I'll say a little bit about that, and then talk about the spatial and temporal flexibility in training and inference of the AI. In the midterm, you have deploying existing generation technologies. This is, and we'll talk a lot about, what is here and now and what's cost effective. Then we have advanced transmission technologies of reconductorings and routers, etc. I'll briefly talk about that. And the interoperability between AI data centers on one side and the grid on the other side. And so can there be some unique flexibility that you can get out of the grid? And finally, the long term is, some new generation technologies, but those are going to be, at scale beyond 20, 30 years. So a new infrastructure as well. So let me just jump into it. This is the capacity utilization of different parts, and this is only Western United States, but it's similar in other parts of the country as well. And what you see is that the average utilization of the existing infrastructure is less than 40%. So you got a 10-lane highway, and you're using 4 lanes of that. And the reason we do that is that the grid is over-designed for the worst-case scenario. And the worst-case scenarios are often called N-1 contingencies. These are, if you knock off a line, you still have to have reliability. And so, less than 40% or 30% utilization, there's potential out there to use the existing infrastructure in a better way. This is on the PG&E. This is Portland Pacific Gas and Electric, or in California broadly. And if you look at the different high voltage transmission lines, it gives the average utilization. And if you line up all the lines in California, you find that there are only very few lines in the red box that are overutilized. But most of the lines are not utilized very well. And so this offers an opportunity. And I'll just quickly flash some work that's going on at Stanford in our Bits and Watts initiative and an accelerator. And so the short-term thing is that maybe we could use the capacity in a better way. And the reason the capacity is not being used is because of the way it is designed. And if you go to a utility and say, hey, give us more power because you got 6 lanes available, and this we cannot because of the N-1 contingency. So one of the work that happened in many different places, but I'll just say a little bit on the Stanford, is to see if you could introduce other ways to take care of the contingencies in the grid, and that led to the formation of a company called GridCare. And in full disclosure, I'm a co-founder of this, is to find the capacity on the existing grid in partnership with the utility, and then essentially sell that to a hyperscaler, and thereby actually open up capacity in the existing infrastructure, which doesn't cost much money. It's really algorithmic and trying to find flexibility. So this is one kind of flexibility on the existing grid to find capacity. The other kind of flexibility is what my good friend Varun has done, and I think he's speaking in this panel, next panel, is Emerald.AI, and that is the flexibility in moving around in both space and time, the algorithm, the actual AI compute power, and thereby match the uncertainty or flexibility that is needed on the grid. And this is purely in the AI, and I'm not going to take his thunder away. I'll let him explain, but it's complementary to GridCare. There's also my former team at Google has started, some of the members have started Verus Power on flexibility again. Again, this is the flexibility side, which is turning out to be super important, whether it's the grid or the compute or any interface in between. I'll just highlight another company called Smart Wires. This is something we funded from RPE 10 years, 11 years, 15 years ago, which is really the router for the electricity grid. And as you know, in data, when you have routing, these are packets of information that are routed, and that's well known. But the electricity grid, there are no routers. The electricity, the power flows down the voltage like water flows down a river. There are no ways to move the power around, and that's why you get a few lines congested and most of the lines underutilized. And what Smart Wires did very smartly is to be able to route the power in different directions and using different lines, and thereby have better utilization of the existing grid, and so that some of the congestion can be diverted to other parts. So these are technologies coming out, and I would say the best thing that has happened to the electricity sector is AI, because it's forcing some of these innovations to happen. I'll go very quickly through this. Different parts of the country have different amounts of capacity that is needed or generated, and that is being generated or in construction right now. And so, as you can see, Northern Virginia is a really important place, and different grid operators in the country, whether it's the Midwest or PJM or ERCOT is Texas, there are different growth patterns that we are seeing. But it's really across the United States. California is actually pretty small in this. I want to say a little bit about what kind of new capacity is being installed to show that and emphasize the cost structure. And this is a chart on the levelized cost of electricity in megawatt hours, and that's what we have seen since my time at DOE, which is 2009 to now. There's some dramatic shifts that have happened. You find that the learning curves of solar and wind have come down to the point that this is now the cheapest way to produce electricity. You find geothermal coming down. I'll say a little bit about geothermal, whereas coal and natural gas are flat or maybe increasing a little bit, but nevertheless, this is not competition. This is a dramatic shift because these all have to compete in the market. And when they have to compete in the market, the levelized cost of electricity, or actually the marginal cost of electricity, becomes super important. But we're seeing a dramatic shift for the first time in human history at this scale, that cleaner is getting cheaper. And what we are also seeing on the storage side is this the cost of batteries, lithium-ion batteries coming down. And I put this red line out here at $100 a kilowatt hour. And that is, even though I'm talking about the grid, I'll just say that when the cost approaches $100 and goes lower, then electric vehicles becomes cost and range competitive without subsidies to gasoline cars. And as we are now seeing, the gasoline prices can depend on a lot of other things around the world. And this one is, it's an amazing change that has happened over like 10 or 15 years. As a result of the electricity costs coming down, if you see what's going on in the United States in terms of new capacity additions, you find most of it is solar and wind. And back in 2000 and 2005, when the shale revolution was happening, you find a lot of natural gas additions. That's the brown on the top. And now it's mostly solar, wind, and storage. And that's a dramatic change in the electricity sector, which is about 120 years old, but this is what's going on. And on the global side as well is a similar scenario that the amount of capacity additions that are going on in solar and wind is like 80+%. So this is a really good sign. And with the convergent confluence of solar and wind and storage, that really makes for a tremendous story. But that's not the only story, and I'll come back to natural gas later on. So this is why I point natural gas. If you build a gas pipeline, a high pressure gas pipeline, the amount of power that you can flow through it is up to 25 gigawatts. Whereas the high voltage transmission line, the highest voltage is now found in China, 1.1 megavolt, and they're now checking out 1.4 megavolts. At that voltage, you can get about 10 gigawatts, but mostly it's about a gigawatt or so. So you get like a 10x factor more in a natural gas pipeline, and that becomes an important factor. Probably the most challenging issue that is going on in the United States is permitting. And I'll just highlight the timeline it takes, the time it takes to build an electricity transmission line, high voltage transmission, versus natural gas pipelines. And you find that the permitting for electricity transmission is much higher. And frankly, it's unacceptable in many ways because it takes so long. And I've worked with 3 secretaries of energy quite closely. And I always say that when I introduce them that, they have scars on their back when they're trying to build a single transmission line. And one of them actually said that it's not just on my back, it's all over my body trying to build transmission lines. So this is one of the major roadblocks ahead in the United States, is trying to build new transmission lines at scale, not just one, at scale, to be not only power the AI, but also be able to move electricity from where solar and wind is generated to the load centers, which were the big cities. And that is really one of the challenging factors out here. I'll say a little bit about natural gas, because natural gas is being used. And if you look at the network, it's really all over the United States, and you can move a lot of power. And this is, the demand for natural gas, of course, going from natural gas to electricity, you got to use some devices, and this is a gas turbine. And if you look at the stock price or the backlog of natural gas turbines, it is on the order of $100 billion for GE and Siemens. And the same thing, and I really hope in this forum you get KR Sridhar, who's the CEO of Bloom Energy, to come and speak. And if you look at where Bloom Energy is going, I mean, clearly this is in high demand right now, but the backlog is 20 billion and it's increasing right now, which is an incredible, first of all, change that has happened. And KR would be the first one to say that they did not anticipate this, but it has happened now. It's great for the companies, of course, but this is what is going on in the world. And if you order a natural gas turbine or so today, the delivery is like 2030 and beyond. So this is on the conversion side from natural gas to electricity. But it's important to point out what's going on, and I'll skip this slide on natural gas, carbon capture, et cetera. I'll just point out a little bit about the water issue in natural gas. And I'm pointing it out because if you are leaning into natural gas, which we are, there are other factors that come in that could be rate limiting. If you go to the Permian Basin today and look at what's going on, you find these massive lakes out there, and that's all water. And the reason this water is there is that for every gallon of oil and gas that you get out of fracking, you get about 6 to 7 gallons of water. And this is, you push the water at high pressure, you frack it, and that water comes out. And that increase in the volume of water that needs to be disposed has gone up dramatically as well. The salt concentration in this water, in the second chart, the middle chart out here, the salt concentration is about, on an average, in Permian Basin, for example, 3 to 4 times that of seawater. And this is not just benign salt. This is some nasty stuff in there. And so one has to get rid of this water now, because you can't just pour it down the drain, so to speak. So what the gas companies have been doing is to pour it down back into the ground and store it. But if you're not careful where you put the water, and if you do it in a shallow disposal zone, what that does is increases the number of earthquakes. And the number of incidents of 4 to 5 magnitude earthquakes in Texas has gone up by like 100x, 10x to 100x. And Texas is not known for its regulatory framework. But when that kind of earthquakes happen because of seismicity induced by the water that you put in, people get worried. And so the regulators have come in and said that you cannot put the water down because of induced seismicity. So the biggest growth industry in Texas, in the Permian Basin, others, is to take this water and evaporate it as quickly as possible. So evaporators have become the big industry out there. I'm pointing that out because if you look under the hood of AI, you got electricity, you got clean electricity, you got natural gas growing very, very fast as well. But there are other factors that come in that one needs to take into account on the environmental footprint of growing AI. There are other technologies that are happening. Geothermal is is an amazing place. This is a company called Fervo that actually came out of Stanford. But behind Fervo is 50 years of research in trying to cut down the cost of drilling and getting more effective in geothermal energy. And one of the PhDs from our school is now the co-founder, and the other was a business school student, used to work in the oil and gas industry. And they came together, and that has cut down the cost of drilling to the point that no one ever thought would be possible. And that's cutting down the cost of electricity. But they're still trying to get to scale. And that's, once they get to scale, this is a really promising technology. And I would just say that in the nuclear industry, the cost of construction of a nuclear plant was going up with scale. It's a negative learning rate. And the first nuclear plant was actually, there was a loan guarantee when I was there in DOE in the Vogtle plant in the Southeast. And there were 2 plants. The second one really cut down the cost quite a bit. But we are now seeing a tremendous amount of interest in nuclear, both small modular nuclear as well as larger, the 1 gigawatt scale nuclear plants being revived. And of course, this is really exciting because nuclear is a carbon-free source of electricity, but it is also expensive. So the idea is, could there be a private-public partnership to bring down the cost of nuclear? In addition to having the cost of construction come down, there is a supply chain issue as well. Most of our nuclear fuel in the past, if you leave alone the fuel for the military side, but the civilian side was coming from Russia, and that's no longer going to happen. So there was a whole effort in trying to kind of put together a supply chain of nuclear plants. Our ores come from Kazakhstan and Canada, but the processing, if you could get the processing internally to the United States, that would be a good security measure. And that's the efforts going on in that. But I would say that this is now this is all looks somewhat like the renaissance of nuclear coming up, but there's some work to be done. Let me end by saying I just wanted to give you some highlights of the short, medium, and long-term aspects of this, and also some of the opportunities and the challenges that we're facing in the United States. Let me stop here. Happy to answer some questions. And if you were to download this report, please use this QR code and it will take you directly to the DOE website for this report.
Dr. Majumdar,
Thank you.
Sending you, thank you, Dr. Majumdar. I'm sending you a couple of questions from the chat box if you wanted to take a look and maybe you can answer.
The first part was, okay. You want me to read through all this?
Highlighted just one question. Maybe you can answer that one because we're kind of close to time.
How China may take the leadership role in innovation sector. Well, China has kind of already taken the leadership role in the innovation sector in clean energy. I mean, they are, if you look at the manufacturing of solar PV and lithium-ion batteries, they dominate the market right now. And we kind of, back in 2010 or so, we saw the manufacturing of solar PV panels moving to China. And that's part of the reason Secretary Chu and I launched something called the Sunshot Initiative to actually not only develop the manufacturing, but also cut down the cost in installation of the solar, because that turns out to be the majority of the cost. Okay, I'm looking at this. There was a time check. Sorry to go exceed.
And then there was,
I think the China question, that's all. Do you think quantum computing will add even more load on data centers? Quantum computing is still early, very early stage. I think actually that could lead to some efficiency. The way quantum computing works is that it solves very hard problems, which are perceived to be computationally almost impossible by what are called Turing machines, and which are today's computers. And I think if you could solve those hard problems like quantum computing in terms of energy use, that's actually more efficient that way. Having said that, what we have seen in the area of biology is what is called a protein folding problem, which DeepMind solved, was thought to be one of those really hard problems. But yet you find AI, generative AI, to actually solve the problem, which deserved the Nobel Prize in chemistry. And so, but that may be more inefficient way to solve those hard problems than quantum computing. So it's still early days. I don't think quantum computing is going to displace traditional computing, but it will be an additionality to solve some of those hard problems, hopefully in a more efficient way.
Thank you so much, Dr. Majumdar. This was so insightful, your session. It was like a masterclass, is what it felt like in energy. We're very grateful for your support, and thank you for everything that you do as well.
Thank you, Amita. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. Okay, I'm going to log off.
So we'll take you off.
Okay, thanks. Yeah.
I'd now like to introduce Suriya Jayanti, the founder and president of Electryka, who is a decorated energy, legal, and policy expert with over 17 years leading engagement with and representing the highest level governmental and energy sector interests. We will be posting a link to her bio in the chat, so please check it out. We are privileged to host Suriya and this illustrious panel. Suriya, over to you.
Good morning, Indian tech and energy nerds. I see the whole panel has joined. Hello, everybody. So I think this is super cool and I think it's fun. And so I wanted to start by pointing out the obvious, which is that we are at a major historical fulcrum point on the intersection of energy and tech that's going to be one of these game changer eras, like the discovery of electricity or when hydrocarbons suddenly became the great energy source. We're looking at a moment like that now. And technology is ever more integrated in all of this. We hear about new AI developments every single day. And we also hear about, as was discussed briefly in the discussion we just had, the ever-mounting energy needs in order to power the tech, and how the tech itself needs energy in order to make energy. And we're looking at something of a vicious cycle, or potentially we are actually reaching terminal velocity and we're going to completely take off. So we're all aware of these issues, and I wanted to give my incredibly esteemed panel a chance to introduce themselves, keeping it a little bit brief, please, because I want to make sure that we have enough time to really focus on content, because you're all such experts. So Arushi, would you be willing to start by introducing yourself?
I am happy to comply with the request for brevity. Good morning or good evening. Thank you so much, Suriya, and the whole team at Indiaspora. I'm delighted to be here. I'm actually born in New Delhi. I lived in New Delhi for my first college degree. My parents are both various DU grads. I love having one foot very firmly in my country of birth and country of work and citizenship primarily together. So my shortest version of the introduction is that most of the things I'm working on in real time around the exact issue of actually actuating all of the data and wackiness of the AI era into something that's actionable for humans is listed in a list of links in the chat. So that will help preemptively answer a lot of questions that I think might come up with reading material. And the places I am right now, which is important to what Suriya is going to ask us about, is that there's a need for many of us who are human capital to actuate quickly in multiple places at once. So I sit in two think tanks. One is CSIS, which is very defense and energy policy and security. I also just joined the advisory board for the Conservative Coalition for Clean Energy and Climate Solutions in Washington, D.C. I am one of the few people with a free markets, libertarian, conservative background who has worked intentionally, agnostically across every part of the energy industry, from oil and gas all the way through tech. I'm the former head of energy strategy at Tesla and launched several of the energy companies. And I now run a venture studio. And one of the companies in my venture studio who I advise through that role is Varun's wonderful company, Emerald.AI. And that's my intro. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Varun, will you please tell us about yourself? Although, again, I'm pretty sure everybody knows all about you, but show us anyway.
No, I'm so grateful. Thank you, Arushi, for the intro. Arushi is our executive advisor. We're thrilled to have her. I run Emerald.AI, which is a company, an NVIDIA-backed company. We aim to make AI data centers more flexible users of power. And I founded this about 18 months ago. We have a fantastic team of 25 AI PhD scientists, and we're working around the world. And we'll talk more about this. Before, I was the Chief Strategy and Technology Officer at Ørsted, which is a Fortune 500 producer of clean power. And earlier, I actually lived and worked in India. I was the Chief Technology Officer of Renew Power, which is a publicly traded company that's India's biggest clean power producer. And I've served in government as well, working for John Kerry. Most important part of my bio, though, is I was there present at the creation when M.R. Rangaswamy convened Indiaspora in Mohonk Mountain Valley, I think 11 years ago, maybe 12, 13. And I'm just delighted to support and be an actual member with my wife, Lakshmi, of Indiaspora. We love to support the community. Thanks, Amita. Thanks, Sanjeev. Over to you.
And last but most certainly not least, Jigar, will you please tell us all about yourself?
Yep, I'm here. Sorry, my unmute and thing is very clunky. I apologize for my look in feel here. I think I look like Princess Leia from Star Wars with this headset. But
It's
Jigar
sexy.
Shah,
It's sexy.
I
Run
am,
with it.
thank you. A serial entrepreneur. Started a solar financing company called Sun Edison back in 2003. Started generating capital in 2013, and then joined the Department of Energy to run the loan programs office. And so very excited about being here, and thank you very much for having me.
Welcome, all of you, and thank you in advance for your expertise. So I want to start us off partly because it's a great segue from the discussion that we just ended on, and partly because philosophy is a great place to start with the bigger picture, sort of philosophical question of, is this all worth it? By which I mean, you may well have heard of the solo computer paradox, right? Where the increased investment ratio in terms of output in technology doesn't necessarily have a linear relationship with how much productivity you're getting out of it. And I think what we're looking at now with the tech, specifically AI, but by no means exclusively AI, and energy relationship is that the increasing technology demands are increasing the energy demands, and then it's, as I mentioned in the intro, a bit of a vicious cycle. And so my question to you is it worth it? Maybe we would be better off with some old-fashioned systems that don't send us into complete hyperdrive on our energy needs and consumption, just in order to keep generating the energy that we then need to power the tech, that we then need to power the energy, et cetera, et cetera. So Varun, I'll start with you, please, because I know that you have touched on the intersection with AI and grids and the efficiency question, which may be a good starting point on the, is it worth it? Where do we break even?
Thanks, Suriya. I'll start by acknowledging the premise of your question, because where I'll end is by stridently disagreeing with this concept of slowing down.
Great.
But I'll acknowledge the premise, which is around the country, around the world, folks see data centers come to their communities. They may see their energy bills rise. This, by the way, historically, it's not clear that data centers have driven energy bill rises, but they will in the future as more data centers connect to power grids and we have to expand power grids and generation. Everybody pays the bill for this. And they may see, AI coming to potentially take their jobs. AI is going through a really tough political moment right now, right? Maine just banned data center construction. It's the first state to do so, but there are 10 other states that are considering such laws. And so you might say, Suriya, that the premise of your question is maybe we should just slow it down. And I think we should acknowledge the concerns around affordability and this massive disruption and upheaval. But my answer is, man, that would be the absolute worst thing to do, because like it or not, we are locked in a race. We can't afford to lose this race. And on top of that, I think AI can bring such tremendous benefits that it will outweigh a lot of this disruption, but it's critical that we're thoughtful about it. I'll just say a brief word about why I think what we do, what Arushi do, what Jigar has been a leader on forever, is to make these large users of energy like AI heroes and not villains. At Emerald, by making these data centers capable of controlling their consumption of energy on demand, we make it possible to bring a data center into a community and turn it into a hero. So now, instead of the local community saying, oh God, I don't want this data center, it's going to raise my bill, the data center comes in and says, don't worry, you don't have to build out your grid so exorbitantly to meet the absolute worst case when 1 million air conditioners are running in Phoenix, Arizona, and this data center is going to ask for its full allotment at that exact moment. Actually, this data center will be a responsible citizen of the grid. It'll throttle down. And we can do this with AI in a way that we've never been able to do before. We might throttle some workloads. We might move some workloads from one location to another. And in so doing, this data center actually avoids expense. It actually reduces everyone's power bills by helping to pay for the existing fixed cost instead of triggering more upgrades. And on top of that, it helps to avoid blackouts by keeping the grid stable. So we like the idea of AI becoming a hero, and an AI for AI can actually make the entire energy system work better. It's important that we don't dismiss out of hand the critics, though. The critics are coming and saying, hey, stop this. Bernie Sanders says, let's just put a moratorium generally nationwide on data centers. that would be catastrophic, both because of the risk and the opportunity. And I'll end here. The risk is China wins. Listen to Jensen's podcast yesterday with Dwarkesh Patel, another member of the Indian diaspora, and you'll hear both the grave fears that Dwarkesh raises, and frankly, some of the nuanced commentary that Jensen proposes. It's definitely worth a listen. You can't afford to lose this race. You can't afford to lose to a communist country. But the opportunity is that we have, nearly free education, healthcare, law, robots that do almost all the tasks that we might once have not wanted to do ourselves. Like, there is a tremendous explosion of value that we can unlock. Scientific discoveries with AI, terrible idea to slow it down.
Does anyone disagree? Is there a counterpoint or a caveat, Arushi or Jigar, that you'd like to add?
Well, the only thing I'd say is that I think what Varun is suggesting is absolutely right. And the data center companies are doing exactly the opposite of what he's suggesting. They are proposing that we should build all of these systems off grid because they don't care about the community and don't want their load to actually reduce rates by 20%. They're saying, like, hey, we should figure out how we drive up the price of natural gas turbines for everybody in the whole world by 3x because we can't do proper planning, right? Like, when you think about the power of AI, we have 100,000 megawatts of trapped capacity in our existing grid, which AI itself could actually unlock, and they are not unlocking it. And so, part of my challenge in this moment is I want to believe what Varun is saying, which is that all of this is possible, and that the rapacious capitalists at the top of these companies actually want to unlock this potential. But time and time again, the super smart experts that they're paying, they're largely Indian people. They're 7 layers down from the CEO, are being ignored, and they do the dumbest male masculine energy things that they could do instead of some of the smartest things that Varun is saying. And so I hope that they take this legislation in Maine as a wake-up call around the fact that they have to earn the trust of the American people and not just try to pay them off like one of the data center companies is doing in Ashburn, Virginia, where they're saying, hey, here's $4 million a home so we could take over this 173, home property and put a data center on it.
So to counter the toxic masculinity concerns, Arushi, why don't you tell us your point of view?
Interesting. I actually completely changed the whole masculine feminine thing on Twitter and totally changed Jigar's analogy because, yin and yang and black and white and Saraswati and Parvati and Shiva and all of these are not masculine and feminine. They are aggressive and submissive. And those things are out of balance. And bringing them back into balance is the heart of my work because incredibly quiet efforts to change things quickly surmount the very loud, silly, blustering efforts to try and do everything without thinking about what comes next, which is really the heart of where I align very deeply with what Jigar is saying. Suriya, the reason that we have to do this faster and ignore the immediacy concern is that we are already socially in a deep and systemic technical debt. By that I mean that we have other things for AI that were supposed to be here to provide us and do provide us tons of data and had tons of opportunity to already do all the things that we think now AI will help us accelerate to actually get done. Like the first time we had dynamic line rating and sensor-based information to figure out how to help stabilize a power grid was not now, it was 20 or 30 years ago. Like that's when that technology came into being. And the reason that I originated the paradox for you as a way to look at this is what I'm going to say, which is that the gestation period between new things showing up, new ways to have information, and then us actually creating the tooling to use it is getting longer and longer and longer and longer, to the point that yesterday I was sitting with grid operators from New Zealand. There were several of the CEOs came to speak to me about work in the US that they can take there. And they said, can we, because we're so small, can we jump over the technical debt the United States has created for itself and take, like the Emerald.AI solution, for example, and just implement it whole scale immediately because we don't have all the other problems. And I think we're just ready because we're so behind that I think we can jump forward quickly. And that is a resolution of the paradox and a reduction of the gestation period. And frankly, every issue that data centers are supposed to be responsible for truly are a look forward allocation of blame to a problem that has been slowly and seethingly growing in our country in spite of and unrelated to artificial intelligence. So I can't think of a better, I'm going to go right back to the Vedic ideal mindset here. I can't think of a better like Kali Yuga moment, right? It's like we're in this like awful down cycle, which is going down, 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 down. There's absolutely nothing about artificial intelligence that's going to make this technical debt go more down than it already has. It just has to go up. And I just hope that it goes up in my lifetime, right? That's what I'm hoping for. And I think people like myself, the servant leader mentality is motivated by that fundamentally, that even if it's not in my lifetime, I'm doing it for my kids.
And on the subject of next generations, what about the climate aspects of all of this? Because this kind of energy consumption, without having implemented a full energy transition, without the world going totally nuclear, for example, has huge environmental consequences. And at the same time, the technology, in theory, could very quickly make everything more efficient and, in theory, cleaner. Where do you think we are on that timeline, on that spectrum? And Arushi, because you brought up the subject of future generations, why don't you answer first?
I think that climate needs to be a term that people who leave their house associate with as a bodily threat. I really do believe that. For so many years, solar and batteries could have been a climate solution for poor communities.
Sure.
The first coastal solar battery program in the United States for tornado-warned communities where people have died in power outages is a program I built and designed last year. And the level to which, and I didn't use the word climate, I just was like, I went to these, deep South folks and I was like, guys.
Hey,
like,
don't want to die in a flood.
So, so this kind of goes back right to my thing. Like, that's my belief, is that I'm not so interested in looking in the past. I'm interested in looking in the future. Like, when you leave your home, is the air you breathe and the experience of your life, is it personal enough? And I absolutely think we need to personalize climate. And we made a huge bungling mistake that we haven't done that well enough yet.
And Varun, how do you then get tech to do that? How do you use tech to make it personal and fix the problem?
Yeah, great question. Look, I founded Emerald.AI principally because I thought data centers not only could help lower bills for communities, they could actually encourage clean energy adoption. This is kind of a nuanced point. And again, I point to Jigar as maybe the luminary who has come up with this idea. Arushi actually runs a firm called Luminary as well. The idea is simple. Clean energy sources such as solar and wind don't generate energy all of the time or on command. They're not what we call dispatchable, but they're cheap. They're fast to deploy. If America needs more energy, or Europe needs more energy, or any country, India needs more energy, that's the best way to just quickly get more energy onto the system. However, if you don't have a compensating user of energy that's able to use those variable sources when they're available, then you'll have this mismatch. And so traditionally, data centers say, I want energy available to me 100% of the time, and I'll use it at some arbitrary time, and it will, it may or may not line up with when the renewable generation happens. Some pioneer firms like Google demonstrated that they could start to change when they used energy, such as doing YouTube video indexing. They might do it at night when there's strong wind power. So what we said was, if we have a lot of these users on the grid, we might make it possible to integrate more clean energy onto the system. And this is traditionally not a big opportunity because data centers are less than 5% of the American grid. But in the next decade, they could go up to 25% or more of American power demand. That's a huge percentage. If those loads can suddenly be flexible, just a little bit flexible, it makes it possible for all the clean energy sources on the grid to better integrate onto that grid and better serve those loads. So we'll have a double win. You bring these flexible loads on, you make the economics of renewable generation better, you get more energy in the country, and oh, by the way, costs go down for everybody because that is the cheapest, fastest way to build energy. And in the long run, Suriya, you mentioned nuclear. Huge fan. I think all three of us are big fans of nuclear. We'd love to see a lot of nuclear come onto the system. I think you're seeing some things, and I'll put a less fine point on it than Jigar did. You'll see some data centers say, look, I'd like to take this existing nuclear plant effectively off the grid to serve me. That creates other problems, right? Because you're effectively taking energy away from existing communities and you aren't creating net new generation to support your data center. So there are responsible ways to do it, and I'd love to see a range of clean energy come on to support this data center boom, because otherwise the data center boom could actually be a climate catastrophe.
And on the subject of what those emerging technologies can and should be, Jigar, you have been at the front line of picking winners. And so maybe you could weigh in on what the most exciting technologies are that you're tracking right now.
Yeah, it's a good question, and one that I think needs some redefinition. I think for a long time, the exciting technologies were, defined by whatever received venture capital and whatever was covered in Shale Khan's, Catalyst podcast. I think today we are now faced with an energy crisis that, frankly, I think will be larger than any of us have faced in our entire lifetime. Right? What's happening in the Strait of Hormuz is going to be larger than anyone can imagine, and will last for at least 3 years now, and maybe longer. Right? And so what's happened today is that governments like India, but also China, Indonesia, Brazil, Mexico, and the United States are now seeking solutions at scale, right? They want to localize their energy. They don't want to be importing fossil fuels or, anything else, right, into their country. They want to be producing things locally, which could be coal, but often it's solar and wind and battery storage and nuclear and things like that, right? And so you're seeing this extraordinary desire for governments that largely are trapped by existing energy suppliers to look at new ideas for the first time in 20 years, right? And so what I'm super excited about are technologies that are ready to scale. So when you think about Chris Singh and Holtec, right, who's been a pioneer, entrepreneur in the United States for a long time, his Holtec 300 small modular reactor just got their first 2 permissions to build Pioneer 1 and 2 at the Palisades nuclear plant in Michigan. He is now, selling 50 of those units into India and another 50 in other places around the world, right? I think that company is going public this year. When you look at Fervo and the geothermal technologies that Arun talked about, these guys are really scaling up through, the use of tech, right? And even nuclear power, to Arun's point around cost overruns, there's new technologies around how you do better EPC management using AI, right? How do you create, better work packages so that you don't have these cost overruns? And so what I'm really excited about is the technologies that people have written off, but are actually amazing technologies.
Give us one.
Well, nuclear and geothermal to be 2 of them. But the other ones are long duration energy storage. So everyone's obsessed with lithium ion batteries, but I think AI is going to unlock vanadium redox batteries. I think they're going to unlock zinc halide batteries. I think we're going to unlock sodium batteries. So many different battery technologies that frankly are better for behind the meter data center, usage than lithium ion is. Because lithium ion has only a 5th number of cycles, no matter how good you do them. Some of these other technologies have infinite cycle life. Right, they just have other challenges around things, and so I'm very excited about this moment, because I think a lot of the people who are used to being stuck in their ways are being forced to look at new solutions, and we have this moment, I think, of conflict that frankly is going to allow a lot of these technologies to scale up to billion and trillion-dollar scale.
Thank you. It's exciting to hear about exciting technologies, particularly ones that are maybe not fringe, but sometimes overlooked. I'm going to take a couple audience questions, or rather, you are going to take a couple audience questions. The first clump of questions is about paying for all of this. And there are questions about, 1, how governments could pay for it, 2, how economically disadvantaged communities could pay for it, and 3, why don't we just have the tech, specifically data centers, pay for themselves at this point? And I think there's also the nuclear element, of course, which is if you're looking at a technology with massive CapEx requirements, then how do you make any of this viable? So Varun, would you give us your take, please, on the how to pay for it and who should?
Yeah, great question. I want to go back to Jigar's original point where he said these data centers are doing this very irresponsible thing by going completely off grid. And I think at least somebody in the chat was like, wait, that's irresponsible? Isn't that responsible? Wouldn't it be nice if they went off the grid and stopped burdening our grid with all the costs that they are triggering, right? And so it's a very counterintuitive point that Jigar made, and I just want to unpack it a little bit. So you might think data center should just go completely off the grid, buy its own natural gas plant, buy its own electrical equipment, and just be off as an island and leave the rest of us alone. If that happens, the following three things happen. The first is, as Jigar said, the cost of all the components for the rest of us, the gas plants that serve us, the electrical switchgear that serves our grid, that all skyrockets up, right? So we all pay higher prices because they have gone and monopolized the supply chain over there by being what appears to be responsible, by staying off of our system. The second thing that happens is our own grid loses out on the potential generation and electrical equipment that could be supporting our grid, right? Because the efficient way is for all of this to be connected together. Instead, you have a highly redundant, isolated system there, and a system here that's lacking some of the components, but we could benefit from that gas plant supporting this grid when it's not powering the data center. And third, and maybe most importantly, in my opinion, is over the long run, as I said, 25% of American power demand will go to data centers. AI will eat the economy. That's both a good thing and a bad thing. But when that happens, and the economic GDP is off of the power system, all of us whose homes and businesses are powered by the power grid will be served by a system that has this ever-rising public burden, but none of the revenue from the hottest growing economic sector. It's a death spiral if you take the economy and take it off the grid. So for all these reasons, we should have data centers on the grid is the first thing. But the question is, how do you make sure they pay for themselves? And here, it's critical that they bring in more revenue to the system than they impose in the form of costs of fixed assets that we have to build on the system, whether that's grid infrastructure or generation. That's why being flexible, for example, is one of the many solutions to make them a more responsible entity. And the last thing I'll quickly say is, somebody mentioned water in the chat. I do want to make the point, I think this is a red herring. The upcoming Vera Rubin NVIDIA reference architecture with closed loop liquid cooling demonstrates that water is not going to be a particularly large part of the footprint of a data center. Neither is land. These data centers are becoming increasingly dense. It is power. It's power, power, power. That is the thing that if we do this wrong, data centers will monopolize the power and raise everybody's costs and make it hard to reindustrialize America. If we do it right, data centers will pay for everybody's power bills and enable us to have a very reliable system. Like, that is the defining issue, I think, of our time.
With our last minute, would either of you like to add anything to that? Otherwise, I will wrap up to keep us on schedule. I just thought, for the sake of posterity on the subject of gender issues in energy, I'd like you all to know that the battery storage facilities that I build identify as a farad, and therefore avoid the issue entirely. Thank you so much to this panel. It's been lovely working with you, and I have no doubt that this was super illuminating for all of our attendees. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you so much, Jigar, Arushi, Varun, Suriya. This was such a wonderful panel to listen to, so illuminating. Indiaspora is super grateful for your support. I want to now introduce Piyush Verma, who is a senior fellow at ORF America, where he leads the organization's work on energy and climate policy. Welcome, Piyush.
Yes. Can you hear me? Good.
You can go ahead, Piyush.
Shall we? Okay. Yeah, great. Thank you, Amita, and great to be joining today for this very important conversation on AI and climate intersection. I think we have a very limited time, so I'd like to straight away go into the conversation. And I have a fantastic panelist today, Sachin Kumar, who is AI fellow at Harvard Mittal Fellow at Harvard University. And I have Auroop, who is a distinguished professor, civil and environmental engineering, and with Sachin and Varun, Auroop, I think we are going to have a great conversation Let me just maybe briefly to put this, into the context. So AI, there are two worlds we are talking about. Like there is a climate world and there is the AI world. Climate world, a lot of my work on the energy and climate side, and we are talking about on the net zero impact, right? We are thinking about how to create net zero and what is the role of AI into creating that net zero. And on the other side, when we are talking about AI, we are talking about net positive impact. So this net zero and net positive kind of the question that we have on the AI and climate intersection, that's where we are going to have this conversation. And with Auroop's and Sachin's work on extensive academic and research work that they have done, we are going to reflect on some of those important questions. So maybe I would like to come to you, Auroop, first. On the question of looking at, especially from the climate science perspective, where do we understand AI and climate intersection, especially like looking at last 10 years, and if you see like where we are now in terms of technology development, and especially in terms of where we are in terms of AI, what is the difference that you see? Like what we have been able to achieve in this 10 years, and how AI can help on the climate side?
Thank you very much, Piyush, and thanks for having me, Amita, and everybody else at Indiaspora. So I think the progress significantly that has been made, and that is that everybody can really see. Climate is a bit hard to see because climate is focused on the longer term. I mean, if we are going to get a bit nitpicky about what is climate versus what is weather. But what we are able to see clearly are the tremendous gains that AI has made in numerical weather prediction. In fact, I would say weather prediction has almost become one of the poster childs for what AI can do. So the best weather prediction models in this day and age, they encapsulate AI or they are based on AI. There have been a lot of work coming from whether it's Google DeepMind, whether it's NVIDIA, Microsoft, and all of these other large leading AI companies, which have shown that weather prediction can benefit. Now, although weather and climate are slightly different in various ways, but of course, if we are thinking about a world where climate change exacerbates and intensifies weather extremes, then early warning systems become extremely important for weather. And being able to respond to weather hazards is important from a climate adaptation perspective. So in our work, for example, and I'm just using that as an example since I know most about it, we showed through a NASA-funded research project that hybrid physics AI systems can enable stakeholders like the Tennessee Valley Authority to inform flood and river management, as well as operators of dams, reservoirs, and hydropower.
If you could just tell Auroop, for the audience benefit, what does it mean, like hybrid physics AI system?
Good question. So we have, when our numerical weather prediction, or indeed climate or water kind of models were built originally, we did not have the benefit of as much data, as much compute power, or the algorithmic ability to really use whatever data and algorithms we had in the way that we do now. Today, we have all these data, all these GPU and CPU-based systems, tremendous ability in terms of algorithms. But question that comes in, some of the fundamental physics that we have, and I use physics here in a broad sense, it could be physics, it could be biology or chemistry, but do we discard all of that physics or all of those engineering principles completely in favor of data? That could be a mistake, because then we'll have to rediscover all of those physics. So what has been found recently is that if we can find intelligent and effective ways to combine physics with AI, especially in certain situations, such as when we are interested in predictive insights on extremes, and sometimes extremes are among the most important. Now, extremes by definition will not have enough data. So that is where we are seeing that these hybrid physics AI kind of combinations become very important. So
Great.
Piyush, does that answer your question?
Thank you, Auroop. Yeah, and I think as you talked about from physics to potential, I think maybe Sachin can talk about some of the realities, real applications, if there is any already pilot that's already happening in terms of how AI can help on the climate world.
Thank you, Piyush, for inviting in for this wonderful panel, and thank you to the Indian diaspora. So this question is really important because there is a lot of hype about artificial intelligence, and particularly it is in, you can say, use cases based domain in which presently artificial intelligence is being deployed. But if we talk about artificial intelligence impact in social good and specifically in climate and sustainability, so there are a lot of things happening. And if we take examples of the energy systems, so that is probably the most mature space where artificial intelligence applications and you can say real world examples are there. Like utilities are using artificial intelligence for demand forecasting, load balancing, integrating optimally renewable energy sources like solar and wind power into the grid. For example, companies like Google have demonstrated significant reductions around 30 to 40% in cooling energy use for their data centers through AI. And they have been doing it consistently over a period of time. So this is not an experimental stage. This is like a deployment, you can say implication of artificial intelligence and how much benefit it can contribute to the climate, you can say climate domain. Apart from that, we have several examples related to how artificial intelligence can help in flood prediction and humanitarian response. Google Flood Forecasting Initiative, again, is already operational in many countries and specifically in India and Bangladesh, providing real-time flood alerts to millions of people. And it is actively saving lives by improving preparedness and responses. Artificial intelligence is also being applied now in agriculture space, where present day agriculture, traditional agriculture is moving towards precision agriculture, where this precision agriculture driven by artificial intelligence is helping farmers optimize irrigation, fertilizers use, and also monitoring the crop health. So these are real world examples which are happening. And if we see from the perspective of the urban systems and smart infrastructure, so there are a lot of examples where local bodies, governments, they are utilizing artificial intelligence technologies to optimize building energy consumption, making traffic smart, you can say traffic flow smart, utilizing in smart traffic systems and automatic, you can say challan and all these type of things, and specifically in urban planning decisions to reduce emissions at the urban and city level. So there are a lot of things happening, and it is happening because in the previous stage there was digitalization of the governance systems, and then AI system came and utilizing the already existing data, which makes it easy for artificial intelligence systems to utilize that data and then bring the ability which can predict, which can monitor, which can identify, and which can ultimately contribute to the well-being of the system and addressing the addressing the challenges in the climate space.
Thank you, Sachin. Thanks for highlighting, some of the great examples that are already happening across the world. For me, one of the kind of, when I also think about like this AI, there are a lot of kind of positive impact as you are talking, but there are unintended consequences as well, right? We are talking about huge demand for energy that AI needs. And how, especially, for example, here in the US, we know how the grid infrastructure is getting, strained. There is additional stress coming on the grid because of demand for electricity, maybe, from data centers, but there are other demand as well. EV, maybe coming, maybe we are seeing extreme weather, like extreme heat as well. So all this kind of coming in, where are the limits and trade-offs and how those can be managed? Like, how do you see these consequences that we are getting, that how we can manage that, like those unintended things? So maybe Sachin and then go to Arup, if you can.
Yeah, thank you, Piyush. So this is a really important aspect and very critical issue around artificial intelligence, because at one point in time, artificial intelligence is helping us to address societal problems and climate problems. and on the another side, it is like contributing to the climate problem. So then we have to think it from different perspectives, and we have to think that how we can presently utilize artificial intelligence so that the innovation doesn't suffer, as well as we are able to address climate related issues because of artificial intelligence. So on one side, we see that AI is driving efficiency, productivity, optimizing energy systems, improving forecasting, and reducing waste. And on the other hand, we are seeing that artificial intelligence and presently generative AI models, which are large training models, which require a lot of energy and lot of, you can say, support of digital infrastructure in the data center, which is very energy intensive. And because of that thing, footprint is growing rapidly. But at present point in time in 2026, there is one report which says that at present point in time, data center currently account for around 1.5% of global electricity. Roughly, that is 0.5% of the carbon dioxide emissions. And that is not big at present point in time. But similarly, if we see the another report, Microsoft own sustainability report shows that 23% increase in total emission since 2020. So that is driven by AI and cloud expansion. And these are two things. Cloud is required because you want to centralize the data, you want to store the data in the central location and then do the processing. And then because of AI training, and you can say computation power and data crunching and everything is happening. So this is a huge challenge. And once this is huge challenge, so we can think and we can go in the direction of that to calculate the net impact of these overall technological developments. So if we see that AI systems consume energy but enables the significant portion of larger reductions in the emission, then it is a good technology. So we should think about in the long terms, we should focus on the life cycle of the emissions rather than just focusing on the compute cost. And in this context, it is very important to know that what is the current, you can say, current climate return on the compute. For example, according to one of the statistics, AI weather model achieve comparable accuracy to the traditional systems at 9% of the computational cost. So it is like that they are in the same league of accuracy, but still they are utilizing less energy, computational energy. So if we deploy these type of systems, then we will be able to, I think, bring down the negative aspects of artificial intelligence and its technology. And if I take one more lens, or you can say that how we are developing artificial intelligence, so then it is also important that we improve the efficiency of AI infrastructure. When we are developing artificial intelligence, improve AI technologies, algorithms, so that they are more energy efficient, and we move towards the green artificial intelligence.
Great. Thank you, Sachin. Auroop, I wanted to come to you on this, so when we are talking about managing this trade-off, Sachin mentioned, like, we need to improve the efficiency of AI itself. What is your perspective? Like, what else can be done, to manage those kind of trade-off and the unintended consequences that is stressing the grid infrastructure, and there is a kind of competition we are seeing, in fulfilling the demand for different needs. So over to you.
Thanks, Piyush. I think the points that Sachin made, they're all extremely important. I do have another take on this, however, which may be a bit non-intuitive. The first part is, even within AI systems and as they are being used, we have a few issues that need to be handled. So one is, like I was saying earlier, about extremes and transition points. How well can AI handle those? And those are sometimes among the most important. But also, whatever AI gives us, can those things be explained, interpreted, and trusted? There was an article, I think, in the New York Times, was it yesterday or day before, which talked about how important interpretability is for AI in the context of health and medical sciences. I think the same holds for climate adaptation, weather hazards. So if I make a decision as a dam operator or reservoir operator, which has consequences for human lives and livelihoods, I cannot say, well, that decision was made just because the AI black box asked me to do. So that's one thing. So there are issues here, which if we have to use AI, it's not just a matter of whether AI is computationally efficient or how much it can do, but also how much is it interpretable. Now, in terms of the footprint, I think the questions we have to better pose the question. So AI can enable solutions in climate adaptation and mitigation, which can be quite significant from the perspective of climate action. However, this cannot be directly compared with the negative footprint that AI creates, since only a small sliver of AI's overall footprint is caused by AI-driven climate solutions. The massive volumes of energy and water and land that data centers already use and are expected to use in the future, leading to large emissions and other environmental footprints, are driven by other applications, including social media, blogs, internet marketing, customer service, healthcare, finance, manufacturing, and other industries, and unfortunately also in the business of war and espionage and cybersecurity. So the trade-off space, therefore, is not just between AI-driven climate solutions and the footprints of these solutions. Climate solutions where AI contributes is only a small portion of the overall AI environmental footprint, but the societal impacts of these climate solutions are immense. So I think in addition to all that Sachin said, we have to balance these perspectives. And almost all of the things that Sachin said, I agree with, so I don't want to repeat those again. Piyush, over to you.
So no, it's great to hear, a lot of capabilities you talked about, potential of the technology, and also, some of the things that we discussed about managing those trade-off as well. But thinking about the future now, from here, like, maybe medium to longer term, I also saw recently a technology like blockchain, which was at the hype, in 2017, 18. Everybody was talking about blockchain, and suddenly at the pace that it went, kind of, the hype kind of immediately, came down when people started thinking about maybe, there are many other software solutions that can do the same job rather than blockchain. Where do you see the future of AI? We are talking a lot about potential and impact and that it can bring. Do you see that keep building in the future, in next 5 years, 10 years down the line? What is kind of you most excited about this technology? Do you see any hiccups as well in the future?
Yeah. Should I start?
What do you, Ganguly? Yeah.
Okay. So future, I mean, let me start by reminding all of us with what Niels Bohr is believed to have said. Prediction is always difficult, especially if it's of the future. So I remember that when I was using what we called artificial neural networks, then deep learning was still not a thing. So for some aspects of weather forecasting way back now in my own dissertation, and then after that, at some point I started going to, when I started going to the computer science conferences, people discouraged me from using neural networks, saying that they are not that important. I mean, they are black boxes. I said, but they were always black boxes. What happened suddenly? So there was a trend that happened. Everybody said, no, it's not useful. And I said, well, I found them useful for one part of my problem. They don't replace the entire physics, but for that one part, they're incredibly important. So I think they will be useful. And I think, well, over time, we have seen that in this particular case, this was useful, not to say that there was anything prophetic in what I was thinking. But a couple of points I want to make. So one is, as we think longer term, in addition to the efficiency, in addition to what AI systems can do for weather, climate, water, ecological systems, we also have to think that we are embedding AI into so many of our critical infrastructure. And what that means is the critical infrastructure, which we're already getting more and more connected, are now getting even more connected, and some of them are becoming automated. So in the longer term, it's important for these AI-based systems to not only be efficient, but also have adequate safeguards so that we do not have cascading failures, happening almost in an automated way with some domino effects, and we lose track of that completely. But to your point, over the next few years, I think current trends suggest, if we can extrapolate on that, the The biggest climate-related gains from AI would be in adapting to and mitigating the risks of weather extremes, which, as we all know, are projected to intensify. At decadal timescales, based on, again, current projections, the impacts may be most significant, I feel at least, at the nexus of food, energy, and water systems. Over the next several decades, AI can help in the design of climate-resilient materials and infrastructure, as well as in conservation and biodiversity preservation under global change. Piyush, back to you.
I'm glad you're talking about safeguards as well, Auroop, because that is also kind of very, very important to discuss at the same time, because as AI is getting into everything, like these fundamental energy, water, food that you're talking about, on the nexus, how AI can help. At the same time, it makes the system more vulnerable as well, right? And as we are seeing, we are living in a completely different kind of world at the moment, how the infrastructure is being attacked, and how with the digital technologies, not the positive side of the digital technology, but on the other side of the the unintended impact are also kind of advancing. So I think
just one quick note. One quick note, Piyush, is if we look at 2012 India, there was delayed monsoon and there was heat waves, and farmers, because of green revolution policies, they have incentives to pull groundwater when they feel it's needed, right? Which was designed for all good intentions, but the unintended consequences is, of course, abstraction of groundwater, but also that it has effects on power grid. Now, when there are such effects on power grids, at some point or other, things might break, and we had the 2012 blackouts, one of the largest in India. And then we had issues with Indian rail failing. So natural, human, and engineered systems interacting, and AI can complicate that because these things will now become automated. Piyush, back.
So maybe I think we need to wrap up. There is no other question, but maybe just one closing thought, just one key message if you want to give Sachin and Auroop. What is that closing sentence?
Sachin?
Yeah, thank you. So I think I'm fully agree with Professor Auroop, and because there are ethical issues related to artificial intelligence in terms of the data collection and you can say diversity in the data, which can result in, you can say, biased outcomes. So we need to keep those things in our mind. And as a last quick memorable response, I would think that we need to align our artificial intelligence innovation with climate goals through strong governance and clean energy push, so that every unit of intelligence which we create leads to a net reduction in emissions, and we maintain the balance in both sides, that we have huge innovative contribution from artificial intelligence side, and we also are net positive in terms of the damages done through data centers and other computational infrastructure to the energy system and the climate space.
Thank you, Sachin. Thank you. Auroop, yeah.
From me, so we need to make AI systems themselves trustworthy, and we need to safeguard and almost bake in resilience into AI embedded systems, especially when such systems are even partially automated.
Great, thank you, Auroop. Yeah, we discussed a lot of potential and possibilities, but glad we are talking about trust and ethics and safeguards. I think those are very, very important to talk about at the same time. So thank you both, and over to you, Amita.
Thank you, Piyush, Sachin, and Dr. Auroop. This was wonderful and informative. We are super grateful for your support of this event. The next one on actually is a high school student who has done something pretty revolutionizing in the world of wildfire prevention with AI. Welcome, Siddharth.
Hi, I'm Siddhartha, and I'm a high schooler in the Bay Area. I'm excited to present Smoke Signal, which is an application that I've been working on that uses AI to mitigate wildfire, and to talk about my background and how I became excited and introduced in the space. So I've grown up in the Bay Area for a large portion of my life, and throughout my childhood, I can vividly remember bright orange skies because the sun was blotted out from smoke. I'd missed weeks of school because of this. My friends, my teachers had lost their homes, and so wildfires have always been a major disruptor or factor that played a role in my childhood. As I became older, I began to do more research, and I learned that wildfires are pervasive and global. They're a major contributor to climate change. In fact, they emit 10% of emissions globally. They kill over 1.5 million people annually due to direct effects and also pollution. And they burn about 3.7 million square acres a year, which is an area the size of India geographically. This left me strongly passionate about wildfires. And as I entered the 6th grade, I began to gain exposure to the field of computer science. So using internet resources and YouTube, I began to learn how to code and build simple artificial models like convolutional neural networks. And as I became more involved, I learned more techniques, and I slowly began to build out a wildfire detection model. Traditional wildfire detection is reliant on either human oversight of trail cameras, which is incredibly expensive and is not possible for a lot of communities who cannot afford to allocate a person to that role, or it is reliant on complex hardware that costs thousands of dollars. For example, current market solutions average about $7,000 a unit and only have a coverage of about 4 miles, meaning that communities in rural areas with lots of land coverage requirements are forced to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on wildfire detection a year. Finally, the other avenue for wildfire detection, satellites, have massive delays and are often covered by clouds in about 60% of cases. So the model that I built uses smartphone images and trail cameras, and it has an AI overlay that is able to detect with 97% accuracy whether or not smoke from a nascent fire is present. As I began to build out this model, I learned more techniques, and then I began to work on wildfire spread prediction. Traditional wildfire containment relies on circling a fire, but this spreads resources inefficiently, and it means that firefighters are often unable to contain the head of a fire where the fire is spreading. So I began to build this prediction model to diagram where fire will spread over the course of 24 hours. I used a random forest algorithm and also K nearest neighbors, as well as other convolutional neural networks in order to build out this model using over 11 environmental variables. Throughout this process, I was able to learn about earth sciences, about the interaction between these variables. And as I conducted more and more tests, I realized that complex natural and ecological phenomenon, like the spread of wildfires, are influenced by a variety of factors that are not foreseeable for humans. As I began to conduct these analysis and I began to draw these charts that predicted where fire spread, I realized this is not work that humans could do absent the assistance of tools like technology. So now, as I'm introducing these tools to fire departments, I've been able to demonstrate how artificial intelligence is able to predict where fire will spread with over 95% accuracy and how it is able to diagram a fire spread over that course of time. Through internal testing against past fires like the glass fire and the salt fire, I've also been able to confirm the accuracy of these tools to see how in the past application of artificial intelligence could have contained these fires before they burned hundreds of thousands of acres. And I think that there are a lot of challenges present to innovation in the status quo with legal barriers to technological adaptation and limits on data. But I think that my experience in artificial intelligence and my ability to build these data sets and these artificial algorithms has taught me an important lesson, which is that in today's age where so much information is publicly available, there are ways for people to use artificial intelligence for good. And I think that this brings me to my main conclusion, which is that artificial intelligence is truly necessary in order to tackle emerging crises throughout the world. In my case, it was wildfires, where I was able to apply artificial intelligence to understand the ecological factors that lead to the spread of wildfires in order to better detect those fires. But I think across a host of crises that are facing the globe, like, for example, hurricanes, there are places where young people and artificial intelligence can come together and make a difference. And I'd love to answer any questions, and I'd love to speak more about that now.
Siddharth, there's a question that I wanted to, I'll just read it out to you. Can this kind of technology, do you see it being used in any other naturally occurring problem that you can extrapolate these skills that you have to that technology?
Yeah, for sure. So there's a lot of work being done, for example, in the United States in Texas, that looks at applying artificial intelligence to other natural disasters. A lot of studies have emerged that look at predicting hurricane spread or hurricane movement using artificial intelligence. Because AI is incredibly adept at pattern recognition, it's able to look at past hurricanes and weather data, and it's able to make a conclusion that it would be incredibly difficult for humans using these millions and millions of historical instances and these hours of pattern recognition training. and is able to quickly and almost instantly make a decision about where a hurricane will spread and how to best evacuate the populations in the area. Similarly, when you look at tidal patterns and floods, there was a lot of research going on about how to build flood resilience and how to determine which populations will be the most affected by floods as they emerge. And all these things are not possible for humans, but are possible for artificial intelligence models that have these millions of pieces of information that they're able to draw upon in a short time frame.
Thanks, Siddharth. One last question. I'll give you a quick time to answer it. What has been your biggest challenge in this process?
I think my biggest challenge has been gaining access to certain information. So artificial intelligence is very data intensive. In order to build a tool that is reliable and is able to address a specific issue, you need a very large data set. For example, the data set or the algorithm that I built that predicts for fire spread, it used over 1 million historical instances of wildfire spread. And gaining access to this data can be a very large barrier. In the current political climate, for example, there's a lot of partisanship around issues like climate change, and this is making access to that data in a transparent manner very difficultly. And so I think that if there's one thing that people should focus on in order to enable young people like me to gain access to the tools to build artificial intelligence, it is democratizing access to that data so that people of all ages with all kinds of experience and levels of access are able to experiment and build their artificial intelligence tools.
Great. There are some more questions coming. Siddharth, if you don't mind, I can ask you one or two more.
Yeah.
How have you found the fire departments in terms of working with you? Have they been responsive to your suggestions and collaboration?
So I think there's certainly a challenge presented by the fact that I'm still a high schooler. It makes me a lot less credible to government agencies, for example. But I think that I have a great network of support. For example, as I began learning how to test artificial intelligence, I met a professor at the school of Stanford named Derek Fong, who was able to connect me with a lot of incredible people in the wildfire space. Additionally, I'm on the board of the Santa Clara Fire Safe Council, which has enabled me to gain access to fire departments at a level that I don't think most high schoolers might be able to. And so because of these connections that I've been able to build and the mentorship that I've received, I found that I'm able to work with fire departments in a manner that is more equal than paternalistic. But I do think that there's certainly a barrier to adoption in fire departments in that there is a lot of stagnancy. There's a lot of blue tape and there's a lot of dependency on current systems. And so when encouraging fire departments to look at new solutions using artificial intelligence, especially as a high schooler, it does take a lot of effort. But for example, over the past few weeks, I had begun testing with the Santa Clara Fire Council in the fire district, and I found that there are a lot of people who are very responsive and very supportive, especially because I've been so incredibly supported by mentors.
Wonderful. Thank you, Siddharth. I know we are kind of over time. Do you just want to quickly tell us if you're doing any other educational or community-based initiatives as part of Smoke Signal?
Yeah. So through Smoke Signal, I've also been leading at school. I've been leading a lot of climate advocacy through letter writing campaigns and speaker events. And outside of this, I'm organizing a tree planting project across the country through BAPS Charities, which is a 501c3. And then finally, I'm working with the Mwekma Ohlone and different indigenous groups to learn how we can better communicate their holistic ecological management practices, because there's an untapped well of knowledge in those communities that has incredible application for ecological management today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Siddharth, for your time and the work that you're doing. You remind us that the future is so bright. So thank you again.
And thank you so much for the opportunity to share.
You're very welcome. I'd now like to introduce Nir Kumar. He is an associate partner at Dalberg, based in New Delhi with prior experience in Canada, and he brings a depth of expertise in organizational strategy and transformation. Welcome, Nir.
Amita, thanks so much for the opportunity, and great to hear from the previous speakers and all the great work that they're doing. So I've been asked to sort of speak a little bit about speak a little bit about sorry, 1 second. I'm just going to share my screen 1 second. Hopefully you're seeing my screen now, Amita.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, perfect. So I've been asked a little bit to talk a little bit about whether or not artificial intelligence can be truly net positive for the planet. And this is a bit of a reflection on the reports that we have published together with CEW for the India AI Summit. And in that process, we were really speaking to policymakers and countries on what are the possible ways in which they can try and make sure that how AI is used is going to actually create a net positive for people and the planet. And in so doing, we basically had to start with a premise of the fact that AI is not really a choice in terms of adoption. It is a critical infrastructure layer that is already being adopted and integrated into economies, and it is a well-established need for the global South to be able to bring into their economic development cycles and their policies in order for them to continue to stay close to and adhering to the development trajectories that they need, and not have further divergence against the developed country counterparts. And as you can already see, this has been proven out by some similar reports that came through even just in the last couple of days, where you see the generative AI adoption curve going from very early 40% in 2 years to 53% within the first 3 years of its life cycle, much faster than any other technology that's come through, including PCUs and in the internet. So the pervasive nature of this is what sort of started the conversation, and said that this was where we have to start at a point of saying that this is going to be a fact, not a choice, not something that we can avoid, even though there are obviously climate risks. So given that premise, the idea was to look at the different solution sets that are available to us and that are already very much viable on how to reduce the possible negative costs, the ways to mitigate the effects of building out the AI stack and carbon intensity of the technology, as well as maximizing the potential benefits. And I think, as Dr. Ganguly and others have said in the previous conversation, it's not a fair comparison to think of just the climate applications and their climate and their carbon intensity, but rather how can we maximize climate applications and solutions that AI drives with the overall effect of AI's use and development, which may be a little bit unfair, but is actually the need of the hour. So with that in mind, it's important to sort of take a little bit of context into place. First and foremost, AI will represent 50% of compute demands by 2030. And this is some of the data that we've seen in other reports, but also a result of our own analysis. And you can see that this is a growth trajectory as related to AI-driven demand. But the impact of this is actually quite concentrated in specific regions and grids. And we've seen this in experiences that were again cited by others in the previous panel in the US and other places where prices have skyrocketed for certain communities, or where water and other sort of resources have been more intensely used, and where actors have started to be increasingly crowded out. At the same time, the ability for us to be able to make this development green and sustainable is actually quite limited. Today, 50% of global electricity for data centers continues to be driven by fossil fuels, and our ability to actually build out the green and sustainable energy generation is actually quite limited. If you look at not just the generation capacity, but more importantly, the transmission infrastructure, it takes up to 10 years to get some of this infrastructure in place to make this work. And at the meantime, how data centers are on the march and they're building intensely, and already 43% of them are being built for various reasons in high water stress or very high water stress areas, further exacerbating conditions that were already poor, and in communities that may not have the ability to advocate for themselves and voices to be able to represent the needs and the issues that they're facing. So how do you start dealing with this? And on the one hand, how do you mitigate the negative effects? Our reports basically looked at the full AI stack, which otherwise Jensen Huang calls the AI cake, and sort of try to figure out what are the possible solutions available at each of these different layer points. And as you'll see, what we did in this analysis and in the playbook that you can sort of look at it for more detail is to find specific solutions for each one. So for example, in the model and use case solution, and I won't go through all of these in detail because we don't have that much time, but there is a real significant possibility, and I think again, as previous panelists were saying, to focus on the life cycle of AI's uses, not just the training, which I think many people mistake as the core carbon driver or emission driver. It is, in fact, 80 to 90% of the car emissions are driven by the inference over time and the life cycle of use of these large language models. At the same time, there is a very, very strong potential for small AI models, more targeted use cases for these small models to be able to actually achieve the same, if not as accurate results, with far, far fewer compute requirements and far more efficient energy consumption. At the same time, and I think throughout what we're seeing in infrastructure governance and ecosystem, is equalizing the share of focus on energy, on water, as we are concentrated on energy. Right now, we have strong energy requirements in terms of reporting and standardizations, but we don't have that as much or as strongly for how water is used and how water efficiency is being driven. And this has significant potential. We found, some of the latest and most advanced cooling technologies, for instance, can save up to 30 to 40%. How do you get those put in place either proactively in new builds or retrospectively or retroactively in existing infrastructure is going to be quite a challenge, and something that is very much viable if coordination and opportunities are brought together. Similarly, there is a need for grid integration, right? The opportunity is there for the infrastructure to be optimized such that the type of inference, the type of AI activity, and the data centers that you're using those for are matched and batched more appropriately, such that you're using time phasing and peak loads versus idle demand in the right ways to actually equalize some of the stresses on energy systems that we already are facing. And there's proven technology and proven systems that actually get us there. And at the end of the day, it is a matter of making sure that there are strong partnerships in place and strong ecosystem layers, bringing people together that are and breaking down silos that allow the better understanding of resource impact. Throughout our investigation with multiple experts, it's very clear that we're very much at the nascent stage of standards and reporting. And this is going to be an incredibly important place for us to invest and come together in a world that requires, it's a cross-sectoral, cross-border problem, and requires us to be able to, share some of this data and insights so that we can coordinate across these issues. On the other side, there are three core issues that need to be addressed to yield the greatest benefit. So to raise the upside and maximize the benefits that people feel, and then maximize the number of people that feel this. One is on misprioritization. How to balance the effects, the use cases for impact and feasibility, such that it's not only the market-oriented, profitable solutions that are getting invested in. The misconnection component here is how do we actually get some of the solutions and applications that are climate ready and that will address climate adaptation and resilience out of the research phase and research and development into implementation, from ideation, innovation into execution. And there's a significant set of solutions that are actually stuck in this pilot program. And there's been a massive scaling of those pilots, but not enough actual integration. And we can talk a little bit about why that is. And then the third is misallocation. So how are these benefits actually being enjoyed in an equitable way across societies, across communities, and even between countries? So how is, and this speaks to some of the inherent sort of infrastructure and biases that already exist in both the systems that exist, the data that's available, and who has the control and use of that data, but also then how those benefits democratized and reallocated back such that everyone is being able to benefit, and actually those who need it most are seeing the benefits. So this is where we come up a little bit again on the upside to sort of talk a little bit about prioritization, focusing first on articulating the problem and use cases such that we're tackling real world climate risks. We're making sure we're investing in data as a DPI, making it such that, and we recommend that, governments and regulators actually look at putting critical climate data sets as digital public infrastructure that everyone can build on. So it's not excludable, it cannot be made proprietary, and it's invested in over time. And at the end of the day, this requires public intervention and public financing. You cannot do it because there's a market failure there that just otherwise is not going to be cost effective for private companies to be able to handle. Third is around deployment and scaling. So how do you create the institutional capacity to actually take pilots into execution? That today we know is very slow. And private sector is leading the way, but public institutions are where we need to invest significant effort and capacity to be able to say, to bring the research into action and say, and make this use cases useful for everyone, such that, again, the benefits can be redistributed properly. And the example of this, for instance, is that if we are able to do this, it creates a ground truth, a truth-tested environment of what data exists, what is appropriate, what is the actual results of monitoring emissions, as opposed to those that are, self-reported by private sector companies. And how do you then integrate some of this information into decision making, not just sort of research and information for the sake of information, but actually flows into the decision making process for public institutions, for regulators, for authorities to be able to actually make some decisions on what policies need to be put in place and what incentives and activities need to be taken forward. And the third is around how do we make sure that and safeguard the equity and accountability of impact that this AI technology has. And here, I think Dr. Ganguly also mentioned this, but basically ensuring that the human is in the loop, not just in the upfront sort of the less critical conditions, which are obviously going to, which will require human in the loop in terms of validating and testing, but more critically in crisis situations. We're not making decisions in a black box just because the AI told us to, but especially when there are things to do with early warning systems and flood management and disaster response and various other crises and shocks, which are, multiplying every day, and the vulnerabilities are increasing across communities at a rate that's unprecedented. And at the bottom of this or behind all this is a strong, rigorous impact measurement focus on real world outcomes, not just model metrics. So making sure we're looking at what are the actual effects on people's lives, on their livelihoods, on their resilience and their ability to recover. Those are the types of things that people are really looking forward to making sure this happens in order for the impact to be equitable and accountable. So our reports create these frameworks across, create a framework of solutions and actually go into multiple case studies and possible existing solutions that people can leverage, as well as country strategies that people can take up and assess for themselves and in terms of which solutions to deploy. But these basically come up against three different things: responsibility, trust, and ownership. How do we expand AI compute data in ways that respect planetary boundaries? How do we bridge the data divide and method divide such that, particularly in the global south, such that AI is built for and is responsive to local realities? And how do we overcome the pilot trap such that AI systems at scale within public and private institutions and meaningfully support climate adaptation and mitigation for the communities in which the benefits are needed most? You can find out more about both of these reports on the India AI Summit website, but happy to take questions.
Yeah, Neer, I'm just taking a look at the chat box really quick. I don't see any questions. Let me just check my private messages really quick. I don't see any, and no, we're slightly over time. So if it's okay with you, we can wrap up.
Yeah,
Neil, thank you so
absolutely.
much for that presentation. It was so, insightful for me. Just even like seeing, and I saw a few comments from some of our speakers saying that they found them very insightful as well. So thank you so much. I'd now like to introduce Amol Phadke. Dr. Amol Phadke is the Faculty Director of the India Energy and Climate Center at IECC and at GSPP, and a staff scientist in the Electricity Markets and Policy Department at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. Welcome, Amol.
Thank you. All right. Well, it was really lovely to hear the previous speakers and panelists. So today I am moderating a session which is of a bit of a controversial topic, I would say, is that can artificial intelligence be truly net positive for climate? And we really have a esteemed panel. We have Deepak Garg, we have Mihir Sarkar, and we have Richa Mishra. And I'll let them introduce themselves a little more. So here is kind of the big picture context setting for the panel, given the expertise that we have here. So the first question that we have is in terms of how are we powering AI? The reality today is that I was just reading the news today, which is basically the Louisiana Public Utilities Commission rapidly approved one of the most ambitious gas projects in the United States. Gas power generation is as bad as coal if you actually count its methane emissions. It's a 5 gigawatt, $22 billion investment entirely to power data centers from Meta. So yes, we need to figure out how to actually power AI sustainably, given the kind of the arms race in deploying AI rapidly. That's kind of the first theme that I would like the panelists to cover. The second thing I would like to cover is that AI is where infrastructure, the dreams meet realities of infrastructure, right? Transmission takes 15 years to build. Interconnection, yes, we have all this clean energy technology that is waiting to be connected to the grid. We need clean power. So on one hand, we are deploying gas power generation to power AI, and we have trillions of dollars of clean energy assets waiting to be connected to the grid, waiting to be approved. It takes forever to do the interconnection studies. It's just a very different reality of how fast we can deploy infrastructure. So it appears that we are in a very different world. So the second theme we wanted to cover was that can AI actually help solve some of the techno-economic infrastructure problems so that it actually helps fastly integrate clean energy that it actually desperately needs to power AI. And the third aspect is that what else is out there? Like we covered how to power AI cleanly. We want to see if AI can actually solve some of the utility problems to let it connect clean energy quickly. And lastly, what are other high impact areas where AI can actually, solve climate issues? So I would start with Deepak. So I would let each panelist kind of introduce themselves and kind of give your own perspective in any of these themes. So please take a bit of time to introduce yourselves and share your perspective, because this is also like you guys are the leaders in the field. Or if any other big kind of pressing theme that I have not covered and you would like to share with this group, that's also fair and square. So let me start with Deepak.
Thank you, Anmol. Anmol, thank you for putting me on a spot first. Okay, I think rather than me, I think Mirwais and both, which I will able to double click on this. But okay, I'll take it the first, pretty much on me. But just Deepak Garg, chairman, co-founder for STW.AI, started the company, and Anmol to the same point, I started the company focused on a vertical energy utility. I'm sorry to say, but it was a non-sexy 15 years back. Till 5 years back, nobody wants to talk. Everybody wants to talk about, and I know a lot of people are from Bay Area. Everybody talk about Google and all the big ones, Amazon and the world. And when you talk about the energy and utilities, what is that? I go home, I get power and water and natural gas. What's a big deal in that? And now suddenly the whole world from Wall Street to everybody talking about energy and utilities are the most important assets, because to compute AI, you need the power and the water. And I think the good thing is everybody was focused on AI, which is the output, but nobody think about what empower AI, what power AI, and that's really been our focus in last 15 years. And we as a company provide a digital platform vertically focused and from AI context standpoint. Today, we are in 47 countries, work with 500 plus energy utilities, the biggest water, power, gas utility in the United States, to India, to New Zealand, to Australia, to all. We work with them. We think about, I don't want to double click on that. We are the Amazon for the utilities. We empower, we connect billions and millions of customer end users to make sure they understand what the energy company, Amir is definitely part of the energy group, how much hard work a power, water, natural gas company does, to really empower our home or our commercial so-called data center or manufacturing unit to work and get what the outcome is. And just quickly on what been our focus and what's we seen it, we always knew that this industry is very important. The power and water demand and supply is the first time in last 5 years people see the big imbalance. And more, you said that the renewable and the climate is a one side. We talk about that. We need a 30% goal. We need a 40% goal. Some countries want 20% goal. This is like really an infinite variable equation. When the power sector, and I know that a lot of people understand the power right now, but I want to go through the natural gas and the water side of that. In the power sector, what is happening is in the last 10 years, you've seen it, everybody pushing toward renewables. What it does is the main base load is getting completely variable. So when I integrate with the solar, when I integrate with the wind, I'm actually, whatever is my current demand is, I'm making that variable. And on top of that, the consumer side, consumers start using more power in last 10 years because of the EV penetration is happening. We are all adding more and more people on the earth. So there is no way this particular industry will get the less demand. And on top of that, thank you for AI. Data center, you already said that. Utilities are getting the biggest pressure to meet that demand, And while transmission, distribution side and generation side take years to build to even meet the 5 to 10% extra demand while we are forecasting 40%. So I'm just quickly on us. We work with the global utilities, government, Fed, or state to ensure that the all increasing demand of the water and power, is happening. We can solve working with them in our vertical AI native platform to bring people and AI together. Because if the people get intelligence about how to use it, when to use it, they can help the utilities and utilities can help the ongoing.
Right.
Because otherwise, this cannot be balanced because we don't have any time to solve this problem, cannot be solved just like that. So sorry, that's why I said, don't put me on a spot. I will be really taking more time, but I'm very excited about seeing Meir over here, and he's definitely been a part of the great energy company in Europe, your energy group, and they have a multiple.
All right, great. No, thanks Deepak. So I want to kind of move next to Richa, and if you can quickly share, introduce yourself and share your top line perspective, that will be great. And then I will move to Mihir, and then I'm going to trouble all of you with some hard questions. So you get to kind of do your spiel a bit, but then I'm going to put you guys a bit more on the spot as well. So over to you, Richa. What's your take?
Yep. Thank you, Amol, and thanks, Deepak, for a great introduction. I am Richa. I am an engineering manager for AI infrastructure at Meta. My team and I work on the physical layer of the AI infrastructure across our global data centers, which includes servers, power, cooling across the hundreds of thousands of racks. So our work exists at the crosshairs of energy consumption, how we model for it, and the opportunities for energy savings where we can make it. So whenever the question arises of can AI be net positive for the planet, our approach is to have it with the systemic mindset of an engineer. What is the system? What are the inputs, the outputs, and the losses that we're having as part of it? How can we make those inefficiencies better? So I'm here to give the perspective on where our focus is when we look at maximizing every watt of power recovery, ensuring reliability of large-scale AI infrastructure, holistic management of fleet efficiency, and preemptively diagnosing issues using modeling and simulation techniques. So,
great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Richa. And over to you, Mihir. What's your kind of top line take, and where do you sit in the ecosystem?
All right, thank you, Amol, and thanks, and great to be on this panel, and thank you, Amita, for the invitation. So hi, everyone, great to be here. I'll do a quick introduction on my background. I think I've tried to embody the idea of Indiaspora through my career. I was born and raised in Paris, where I'm based actually at the moment, and I've spent quite a bit of time living and working around the world. I worked in India and in Belgium on different things like semiconductors, speech recognition, automotive systems. Then I was at MIT, where I did research at the Media Lab around applied AI and innovation. Did some entrepreneurial ventures in Silicon Valley and in the UK. And a few years ago, I decided to come back to Paris, where I joined ENGIE, which is an energy utility, which is focusing on the energy transition, because I wanted to work on something with a bit more real world, large scale impact, and energy, like we're all seeing, is obviously right at the center of that at the moment. So today I lead AI at ENGIE, where we're trying to take AI out of the lab and embed it into actual energy systems. And that can be renewables, it can be industrial assets like power plants and storage, transportation, distribution, both for green electrons, but also molecules, gas and its derivatives, green gases. And we're trying to make those more efficient, more flexible, and lead to lower carbon across the full energy value chain. What I found interesting in the earlier intervention of Professor Majumdar earlier today was that he mentioned that AI is an accelerator for the energy grid. And I think the way we really see it is a lever for more resilient, cleaner, and smarter energy systems. So overall, let's say I think my work sits at the intersection of AI and the energy transition. And I think that's the paradox at the heart of today's discussion, the fact that on one hand, AI is seen as part of the climate problem because of its growing energy footprint, and the fact that data centers through training inference are accelerating the electricity demand. But at the same time, AI is an optimizer for energy systems, and we see it through use cases, and we can go over in detail around things that we use AI for, like forecasting, for example, forecasting production, but also consumption, for better integration of renewables, like Deepak mentioned, is an important topic. Grid balancing and flexibility that leads to stability and lower losses. We try to flatten peaks by using AI for demand response, for example. And overall, between operational efficiency and energy efficiency, I think those are the two main pillars by which we can run an infrastructure with less waste, less downtime, and lower emissions. And then the third aspect, which I think is growing and is a new way to use AI, is thinking of AI as a system designer. And maybe that's, to me, the most exciting, the frontier field in which we can use AI. Things like prospecting for land for renewable assets or storage assets, designing grid architectures, and there's a lot of work in the US and around the world on smarter grids, but also looking at AI embedded into Google X, the Moonshot Factory's work on Tapestry, for example, which is about optimizing the grid. Then planning flexibility and storage with more and more distributed assets around not only production, but also consumption, with electric vehicles, for example, as one of the assets that's both a storage device, but also consumes electricity. So just about optimizing the system, we're trying to design the system itself using AI. And I'm happy to go into more concrete use cases.
Great. Thanks everybody for that fantastic introduction. So let me kind of sharply put one question in focus, and I would share my perspective, but also kind of get real answers in terms of how to address this. So as I mentioned before, there is a lot of talk of sustainability. There's a lot of talk about net positive versus net negative. Today, the reality is AI is driving a massive boom in build out of natural gas-based power plants. So our own research shows that given the dramatic declines in solar and battery storage cost, if those assets work with combination with existing gas plants, there is a way to solve way to meet the AI energy needs, and we have some research on that, which I have shared. But I want to get to say each of one of you, or if you have any perspective, is that the reality is that a massive gas build out is taking place. Now the question is, what would you do, Mihir, if, say, to flip that, where, say, in 2030, we are no longer building massive amounts of gas plants to power data centers? Like, what would it take?
So I think the the boom in the AI data centers and energy demand around those. There's a quick and dirty way to power these, which are gas powered, the thermal powered power plants. I think that the transition to greener means of energy production are both incentivized by cost, but also by regulations. And we've seen, for example, in the past few years, the IRA, for example, that was implemented by the previous administration, generate a boom for production for new power plants in wind and solar across the US. We're seeing the same kind of demand across Europe and certain parts of Asia as well. Both by implementing solar, wind, leveraging existing hydropower plants, for example, in Brazil, which is a huge there's a huge production of hydro-based energy, but also using storage to limit the intermittency of those kinds of energy. And those that combination is a bit more complex to manage, and therefore I think it takes longer investment cycles than thermal power plants. But I think in the long run, that's the shift that needs to happen in terms of what's the regulatory frameworks that will incentivize companies to invest in those kinds of projects.
Great. So I think I'm going to ask you, Richa, Meta and several others. It's not just Meta. Several other tech companies are, they're of course doing a lot on sustainability, but on the bulk of it, it is powering AI with gas power plants. So how are you guys thinking about it? Is it what Mihir is basically saying, that you are beholden to your shareholders, and if the policy environment is stringent on environment, and if there's a carbon price and stringent air pollution regulations, as companies you will respond and not build all these gas power plants? So how are you guys thinking about it?
Yeah, thank you so much, Amol, and thanks, Mihir, for the perspective. I think one of the things across hyperscalers that we have been prioritizing over the past couple of years, and even more now, is the standard metrics and the standardization around how we estimate the overall energy footprint here. So in a lot of cases, we are still evolving and understanding how the AI footprint should be measured against how much we are consuming. And that requires significant amounts of open contributions as well as open source research. We are doing that as part of Open Compute and with research partnerships across the academic groups. What this is helping us do is standardize metrics for reliability, carbon estimation, utilization taxonomy. I think all of these are going to be the ground making foundation for how we propel these studies to set up and stand these large-scale data centers. Because any amount of governance that we can provide as part of setting up this infrastructure, that is what is going to be used for the long term, for the next few generations, to understand where we could be standing these resources. And this research is intended to globally benefit the entire industry as we collectively strive to reduce the consumption and meet our demands responsibly.
So thanks, Richa, for that answer. Definitely, those things would matter. Deepak, it appears that you have kind of dealt with the utilities the most probably amongst this group. What do you think is realistically possible on powering AI sustainably, given all the infrastructure constraints, the reliability requirements? And if you were to tweak the direction of its primarily being powered by a lot of gas power generation, what would you do? What would be your advice? And also give a sense of realism. On one hand, there is a net zero, we're going to do all clean commitment. On the other hand, it's all gas powered. Like, I'm not able to figure out what the hell is going on. And is it just companies responding to the broader policy environment, or is there a place for innovation? I mean, you worked in this field, so just give us maybe your tight top lines in terms of how would you push this to become more sustainable?
I think I think all of us will be, and all are agreed on one thing, is the money will drive any policy, whatever you want. Yesterday we were talking about climate. Today we are not. Tomorrow we'll start talking about the climate. I'm not saying it's not a reality. It's a reality for all of us, right? And Neer already talked about certain point from the how this used to be a one-way grid become a two-way grid. You know, where your generation is variable, your demand is so variable, right? So I will, and I know Richa is on the call. You know, I don't want to make this statement, but the point is Google, Meta, OpenAI, all of them are really pushing because they know that there's a money demand. They all want AI to compute. Everybody wants people to leverage the AI for definitely either solve the problems, real problems, or just solve the problem. So there's a demand, there's a money, they will dictate it. The world of the data center is really driving all this demand. But when we take it ourselves, and I'm being very realistic about it, the AI cannot be think, or the climate cannot think without a people. It's impacting people, and impacting people, affordability. I know I don't want to talk, in context of the alignment with the governments A, B, and C and D. The affordability is the most important context here. If as a people not able to afford today, it doesn't matter AI or the power, water, what is really requirement for the people? The people need to be living at home so that to live at a home, they need a power and water to live. And then they need to have a good climate. So if we put this across, it's a multi-million variable equation to balance it out. And I feel at this moment when we've been working with utilities, global utilities, energy and utilities companies, irrespective of that is the last 50 years, what Neer also said, optimize as much you want. And Richa said the same thing, that if Meta and Google and all those big companies have a big money to do, if they optimize the energy and water usage, and able to work with the industry and the people, and the three angle comes together, that's the only solution. Because one cannot solve the problem. And again, I'm being very open, the government will get dictated, policy will get dictated by the money. The economics will teach, doesn't matter what, all of us have to be factual is, if somebody you made a very important point, Utah, right? I will give you 10 more articles where the utility companies stop right now in Arizona state, and both the APS and Dominion, both energy utilities run on our platform. We connect we empower them for all the demand supply. They're not allowing data center to be built. They say, okay, you can have billions of dollars. We will not allow you in Arizona because we don't have any water and power to give it to the people. And so I think in the nutshell, it is a 3-pillar problem. It has to be people in the middle with affordability, have to be taken into account to solve this problem in a short term and long. It has to be energy optimization and water conservation in the core of the core. And that can be solved through a vertical AI platform mindset. And I know for sure.
Correct. No, I think, thanks Deepak for your perspective. So what I'm hearing from the panel is that, yes, there is this reality of a gas build out. What Mir is saying is that is also being driven by the policy environment. So if one would to kind of change or impact the policy environment, then the private companies will respond. Richa has kind of nicely articulated that you need clear measurement and governance frameworks. But what Deepak is saying is that policy environment is not just a static thing. It's driven by the money. It's driven by the interest of the data center companies. So I do feel that my own take is that clean energy also has now the aspects in certain levels that it can be built quicker. Yes, you can build all the gas turbines and the aeroderivatives are coming up. But if you want to actually a regular natural gas power plant, there is a 5 to 6 year wait of getting those turbines. There are only 3 major manufacturers of building those turbines. So even if I do believe that with creative solutions, there is a way to align the speed need of AI companies with clean energy. because it can be built faster, because that kind of gets us, because I don't believe that in the very tough race of getting compute, that is probably the biggest priority of the data companies. Environmental aspects are a nice thing to have, but it's not the where the shareholders are demanding accountability. So if there is a way to align some of the beneficial aspects of clean energy, which is speed and maybe more acceptance amongst the community with the needs of data centers, the problem could be solved. I know we are a bit short on time, so I want to kind of quickly do two things. First, I want to get any kind of ideas, say Mihir, you have, others you have, is that we do have a big choke point in terms of getting large amount of clean energy integrated into the grid. There are interconnection studies take forever, transmission build out takes forever. So if you are able to be very precise about what are one or two big solutions that you see to address the faster integration of clean energy, that would be great. And anyone who has a bright idea can jump in as well. And lastly, I want to kind of bring out that Indian critical parent in you. If you happen to be around one, or if you are actually yourself one, I want to give you guys as a parting remark. I want you guys to give a grade of how we are doing. Is it C minus? Is it F? Is it B plus? And where do you think we can be by 2030? So I am not gonna. So first, over to you, Mihir and Richa, and anybody who I want actually a solution of. Do you have any bright ideas how to integrate clean energy faster or kind of match the infrastructure timelines with what AI needs? Over to you, Mihir.
So I think just to complement the discussion, and thanks for opening up, Amol. There's been a report by Eric Schmidt that came out a few days ago saying that he sees and he advocates for a decoupling of the grid from the energy sources required for data centers, especially for the resiliency of local communities. And I think the aspect that is really important to us is public acceptance of infrastructure projects in the energy sector. So I'll give an example of something that goes beyond the use of AI for optimization of forecasting, which is not around really the technology itself, but actually around getting projects approved and accepted locally. So Professor Majumdar also mentioned it as something that's a roadblock for speeding up the deployment of new energy projects, especially green energy projects in territories which have, which have a large footprint in territories and have an impact. And we all know this acronym NIMBY, which is not in my backyard, the fact that people support the energy transition as long as it doesn't affect their view or the cost of their homes, etc. So we've been working on a tool that's called Stakeholder Suite that uses AI to understand how opposition from local communities, NGOs, or regulatory complexity from local policymakers can face delays of months or even years. We've seen the time increase between permitting and actual construction of projects. So what we do is to use AI to analyze public data like local press, policy documents, social media, institutional reports. And we try to not only identify the key actors, their relationships between them and their degree of influence, but also understand their positions and the arguments across multiple dimensions like economical, social, ecological, and track how their sentiment evolves over time. So what we do is to support the project teams to anticipate those concerns and engage more constructively with those stakeholders. And I think that's one of the things where we see a very tangible impact in terms of reducing delays, increasing resiliency across the project that are being developed. And really what the two pillars that we see development of AI in the infrastructure sector are, on one hand, using AI for assets, for equipment, for some sort of augmented digital twins to optimize the system themselves, and we think of them as system of systems. And the other one is AI for people, is how do we augment the processes in the way that people operate those assets, the way of working, the way that they're going to model their processes and programs. And those two pillars are sort of where the new AI technologies coming up around agentic and world models, those kind of things are really helping out. So it's a combination of cutting edge AI with the energy transition.
No, thanks. So I think we are kind of running out of time. So I would suggest Richa and Deepak, just give me your 30-second version, and to keep it entertaining, give you a grade. And I want to close in another next 2 minutes.
Yeah, I think on the grade itself, Amol, I would give it an A- right now. The reason I give it an A- is because we see like there's a lot of scope of growth and opportunities where we have the ability to optimize more. Just to give an example, since you mentioned about the transition time to clean energy, we are constantly working on the infrastructure side to make our infrastructure layer as much agnostic of the sourcing of energy, where we are getting it from. Because right now grids are stable. Like we kind of
Awesome, Richa. Sorry, I have to cut you off, but I
no worries.
Deepak, sorry, really sorry. Deepak, tough job, 30 seconds and great. And then we close the panel. And if we can answer a few questions, because I don't want to kind of run over the other sessions. But thank you, folks.
Amol, to my point, all of us covered that. It's no more regulatory problem. It's no more state and government problem. It's no more energy utility problem. We need to take the intelligence, the AI, to the millions and billions of people, because if they optimize, if they have a right.
All right, great, Deepak.
That's where it is. Okay.
Thank you.
Cool, bud.
All right, awesome. I'm happy to take any questions, but we are also running really short on time. So I will leave it to Amita how you want to handle this.
Actually, we could go on. There are so many questions that we have also seen in private messages come up, but we are a little short on time, and our final speaker is on a tight timeline. So I'll let you guys wrap this up with our immense gratitude. Amol, Mihir, Richa, and Deepak, thank you so much for joining the event and for your support of Indiaspora.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd love to introduce Ashish Khanna, our closing keynote. He serves as the Director General of International Solar Alliance, the first international organization headquartered in New Delhi with a dedicated energy and climate mandate, launched by Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the French leadership at the Paris Climate Conference. He brings more than 26 years of experience advancing energy sector development across the public and private sectors in over 15 countries spanning South Asia, the Middle East, and North Africa, and Sub-Saharan Africa. Welcome, Mr. Khanna.
Hello, can you hear me well?
Yes.
Great. Thank you, everyone. And wonderful to be joining. I must confess, it's my first ever event for Indian diaspora. So that's something special. As you know that I spend a lot of time in development. I had the fortune of working in almost 25 countries in detail, roughly 50 countries in general. And I've worked for 16 years in India on all states as well. It's wonderful to be back home. First of all, I want to start off by saying that as Indian diaspora, you should be very proud that the first UN-style treaty-based organization headquartered in India, this was Prime Minister Modi's vision, that can we create an alternate multilateral institution that is anchored in global south, given everything that's happening in the world, has now 125 countries, and each parliament has to ratify the agreement, head of state has to then sign it, so it's no mean achievement. And because India is now this year overtaken US to be the second largest solar commissioning in the world, that's also important, that how India sees for itself and India for the world. With this background, let me just share 3 broad parts that I want to share with you, and some of it is in line with what the previous panel was speaking. The first is, if you are staying in US and you have doubts of whether the world really wants to do solar and renewable energy, I think the news I have for you is that all the countries largely were not doing it for climate change. They were doing it because of course, the cost dynamics, and now with the West Asia crisis, also for resilience and economic shocks. And that is translating into, while the world took 25 years to do the first 1,000 gigawatt,
The next 1,000 was done in last 2 years, and just the last year we have analyzed another 550 gigawatts has been done. So the world is actually spending almost 80% of all new investments on renewable energy. 80% of that is solar. The big questions, of course, are on supply chain, but a lot of it is concentrated in a few middle-income countries, including in India. So that, I think, is the first story that now some people are saying, is the dynamics going to be very different after the West Asia crisis? I have the fortune of having met 140 countries over last 1 year as part of my new responsibility as Director General. And a lot of them are asking what's going to be different right now after the West Asia crisis. From where I see, a lot of middle-income countries, whether they are Indonesia, Vietnam, India, and Brazil, have their commitment for clean energy. Some have a lot of hydro dependence. Everyone has a lot of solar dependence. So there was never a problem in any of these countries trying to say no. A lot of them would like industrial policy of manufacturing to accelerate. And that, of course, is a very different experience of different orders. Some of them are looking at a lot of different elements of solar. For example, India has the world's largest lab for solarization of agriculture. For some of you who are not aware, again, probably to be very proud that almost $16 billion worth of investment of 16,000 megawatt has happened in changing solar pumps from fossil fuels to solar energy. Maharashtra and Rajasthan are the champions. Maharashtra, for example, has managed to reduce the cost of power supply to farmers from US 10 cents a unit to only 3 cents by doing aggregate tenders of 1 to 10-20 megawatt, 10,000 of them. And that's led to a saving of $1 billion this year on the fiscal side, which is actually being transferred to reduction in industrial tariffs to spur in industrialization. Farmers, which used to get power supply in India, as you know, in the night, because the grid had surplus power after 12, are now getting power supply in the day. It's actually leading to transformation of agriculture as well. We are trying to take that experiment to Africa as well. On the AI, which is a topic, I would tend to resonate of what I briefly heard from the previous speakers, which is I see two broad separate trends. The first trend, of course, is on the generation side. What is going to happen on data centers? What is going to be the ability of renewable energy, especially solar with storage, to provide 24/7 quality of supply to data centers. I personally feel that is a very promising area. There's huge amount of AI and agentic solutions that coming up on cleaning of plants, on managing the electronics. There is a huge aspect of weather forecasting in looking at managing variability of solar energy storage. And that is part of a larger lesson that all the countries are learning. We have lots of research on this, that for all future of managing grids, it's a combination of solar, storage, and transmission. So if any country is looking only at solar in isolation, there's going to be a problem. I'm just coming from Sri Lanka to Washington, D.C., where Sri Lanka had almost 2,300 megawatts of solar rooftop on a 4,000 megawatt system, and that required a lot of distribution level battery storage. And then, of course, transmission, which is a binding constraint for almost 800 gigawatts of energy. But what I want to say, which is the reason I was in Washington, D.C., the most of the important innovation on AI, and that's a lot of global South-led work, is going to happen on consumers-centric and utility-level change. We in International Solar Alliance had launched a global AI mission for energy during the AI Impact Summit that was held in Delhi in February in front of 20 heads of states. And what are we doing and why we are doing that? Because we believe the utilities business model of distribution, supplying power to households is going to be radically transformed in next 5 years, the kind of a transformation that Amazon did to retail, where millions of consumers will become prosumers with both the rooftop and a battery. Some will have EVs that can also supply vehicle to grid power, and an IT architecture which is being developed through India Energy Stack will enable peer-to-peer trading. Whether you are in Delhi, you can sell power to Karnataka and others. We are seeing a lot of these use cases in other countries as well. Brazil has some interesting models. London had also done such. And as an alliance of 125 member countries, we are trying to come out with an IT architecture that if you are a distribution utility, what is your path of using AI for better consumer service, for better efficiency and investments? And that requires a certain stack of what are the enabling IT investments that are very important. It may start with smart grids, looking at smart meters, but also with a lot of rooftop solar, distributed renewable energy management systems, compounded by seeing how that data is going to be used, because you first need to capture data that is actually reliable. And then there's a lot of systems that are today available, including digital twins that I heard somebody speak about. And then finally, there is a lot of AI that's going to run the systems in 2 utilities in Delhi, a utility in Jaipur. You can get a new connection in like 5 minutes because you go to, and there's a real-time availability of what's the distribution transformers capacity and others. We are piloting AI in 2 states in India, Brazil, Bhutan, Sri Lanka, Ghana, and Mauritius as pilots, because we believe it's very important to have a lot of use cases for this big revolution that's going to happen over the next 5 to 10 years in energy management systems at the consumer end. We also focus on policy and regulations, because for private sector to invest, they want long-term policy and clarity on standards, on investments, and on some of these elements. Very important part that we are hearing from a lot of countries is on skill set. A lot of electrical engineers who have been managing the grid do not understand, nor of course sometimes appreciate AI. And a lot of AI engineers do not understand the nitty-gritties of electrical systems. And therefore, there is a big space for bringing these 2 sectors together in terms of skills, in terms of looking at solutions, which are essentially not only technology solutions, but they are also integrated in actual business process reengineering. Because the AI usage, just as a technology, will not lead to intended outcomes if it is not integrated into business processes. And then, of course, in fact, in some countries, including in India, the innovation space on this is quite fascinating. I'm part of some of the evaluation committees on innovation challenges, and a lot of you who are looking at some solutions. This is a fantastic space, whether you're making sensors, whether you want to do digital twins. It is just a very exciting space with, I'm sure, funding and revenue models are going to evolve considerably. And what we are, if we do these use cases, capacity building, policy regulations, and innovation ecosystem, I think this space does need more financial innovation as well, whether on blended finance structures and others. That is what is there in terms of our global AI mission for energy. We are working, as I mentioned to you briefly, in about 7 or 8 countries, and we wish to train at least 100,000 people on AI and energy. Hope to incubate at least 10 companies that can actually come out with cutting-edge AI solutions and mobilize at least a couple of $100 million to help all the world. So I'll stop here, because I must confess, I don't know the audience in terms of your level of expertise, your interest, and perhaps it might be a bad idea for 5-7 minutes to see if there are any questions. I'm happy to take them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ashish. There are a couple of questions I'm happy to ask you. Okay, so the question is there sufficient infrastructure to provide solar panel installation rapidly to low-income communities in India and elsewhere?
Absolutely. So this has 2 parts. India itself now manufactures about 75 gigawatts of cells and modules, compared to about 50 gigawatts of annual additions that's happening in India. In fact, I get a lot of calls these days from CEOs of Indian companies that, can you help me sell my stuff in Africa because I've developed overcapacity compared to Indian requirements. The question, which is a more difficult one, is, are Indian manufacturers of solar PV panels and lithium-ion batteries, which is existing technologies, cost competitive compared to China? It's a tough question. I think eventually there is an attempt to actually reach cost parity, but there's a whole innovation ecosystem that is much more difficult to replicate. Our belief is India needs to invest a lot more on newer technologies, because the ability to look at new storage technologies or new solar PV technologies would be, but definitely no supply constraint on meeting all aspects of Indian.
Oh, wow, that's a very interesting perspective that you just shared. We have one more question. They're congratulating you on the establishing of this institution in the global south, and wondering what would be good ways for the diaspora to partner for meaningful change.
That's such an exciting question, and I think that's part of the conversation. And the conversation is probably needed on multiple parts. The first part is, I believe there is a lot of exciting innovation on startups that is possible in this space. If you are in Silicon Valley, that means you have venture capital connections. If you are a startup, I think it will be great for you to explore this space in India, but also all 125 countries, because as Indian diaspora, what we want, and this is my very strong belief, that India should be the human capital for the world. I've worked on 25 countries. Some of the most fascinating colleagues and who have impressed me have all been either Indians born elsewhere or Indians from India. And therefore, I think for financial and venture capital people and startups to come to this space of intersection of AI energy is one clear space. The second is, frankly, if some of you, and I'm being biased in this because I did it myself, leaving US to go back to India, I think it's just one of the most amazing times to be back as part of a very energetic place in terms of buzzing with ideas on what is really possible. And therefore, if some of you who want to come back, either set up again a startup, set up a learning academy, work with a particular utility, work in government, work in other places, I think it's very exciting. And the third and final point is on collaboration, because I think wherever you are, whichever organization or agency you are, look for ways to collaborate with either Indian companies, Indian startups, and others, financially, at least being mentors, being coaches, and others. So there are various opportunities. But frankly, this is a generic answer. I think the devil is in the detail. So the right space is that if you have a particular company and an interest to work in a particular area, you start figuring out, okay, what's the exciting thing happening in India? Like, I'm just coming back from a presentation on India Energy Stack to the World Bank spring meetings, which is that India is trying to replicate what the team did for digital physical infrastructure, UPI, in actually India, or in terms of energy. And that's a fascinating space. So you can engage there.
Wow, that is actually very fascinating. We do have a couple more questions if you have the time.
Sure.
Okay. So one question was, do you see EV battery adoption based on lithium ion only or any technology for the long term?
That's a great question. I wish I had the final answer. I would have made billions myself. But it's a question that is definitely worth exploring, because I do feel different kinds of batteries, solid state, sodium ion, and others will need to be explored. Right now, some of the startups are in an advanced stage of looking at this. I personally feel if you are in, this is something, if you may feel that countries are going back on their commitments against EVs, I can assure you that that's not going to happen. Just look at the Delhi EV policy draft that was issued. We were part of drafting it. There's a lot more ambition happening in India and elsewhere on this. And if you can come up with newer technologies, newer institutional models for deepening this, there's going to be a lot of space for that.
Thank you. There are two questions regarding upskilling and reskilling, and I'll kind of try and combine them into one.
Sure.
Anything that we can do in colleges in terms of mandating certain kind of internships or any kind of courses or education that we could introduce at the college level that will then generate the next crop of duly skilled people in the field?
Again, it's a question which is excellent, but also dear to my heart because, as I mentioned, the AI skills and the electrical skills are not aligning. And I will add the public policy element to that as well. So, we, for example, finance a master's in IIT Delhi on renewable energy for mid-career students from Africa and low-income countries. 90 of them have graduated over the last 5 years, and they are now in middle or senior governments of the government, which I think is fantastic soft power for India, in addition to, just having very skill building agenda for the. If you are a student, my advice, I was very lucky to actually go to Harvard as well. And what I figured out worked for me, which is what I can share, challenge yourself in taking very different courses. So if you feel you're a hardcore maths geek or an energizing person, take a psychology course, take an economics course, because I fundamentally believe the disciplinary approach of learning is very good when you actually deal with very complex crises. Similarly, the other side of it is do as much of practical experience as possible, because everything that's theory, ChatGPT or AI will take care of it. But your practical side of curiosity, problem solving, managing interpersonal aspects, that's something that nobody can take. So the sooner in your life you take on those responsibilities, better it is.
Oh, wow. That is such a wonderful note to end on. As some say, maybe it is the age of the generalist after all. The sentiment that you shared about Indians doing amazing work, whether it is here in India or across the world, is really the ethos of Indiaspora, where we're trying to bring to the forefront all the wonderful work being done by people of our community. So thanks for sharing that sentiment back to us. And thank you again for your time, your insights, your expertise, and for the work that you're doing in India and elsewhere. We'll wrap the Climate Summit with this. A huge thank you to all of our speakers. Thank you to our attendees. Please be in touch with us if you have any following questions. And goodbye. Thank you.